We're on Steve Bannon trial day 4, but before we can get into everything, oh my goodness, we got to make sure that the tubes are connected, because if we're trying to, shove something through a tube and the tube is not connected to the other end of the tube, then stuff might come out in the middle of nowhere, and we don't want that to happen. But it looks like we are working and alive and well, and so let's get started, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we are talking about Steve Bannon. It is trial day 4 and a little bit of an interesting day today, kind of slow, but for those of us who are kind of really interested in the nuts and bolts of this, very good stuff, because we're talking about a judgment of acquittal. The defense judgment of acquittal went out today. And so let me give you a rundown about what we're talking about before we actually dive into it. As you can see, we of course are at our mind map at j6mindmap.com. If you go there, look at this, we zoom out on this puppy, we have just a lot of stuff going on here. And I know that when we start really diving into these trials, this stuff can get a little bit unwieldy, but we are going to zoom in today and just focus exclusively on Bannon, of course. The timeline here, we have been in trial this entire week. Yesterday, we left off with the prosecution resting. Government lawyer, her name is Kristen Ammerling. She was testifying yesterday, and she was the counsel, right? The committee lawyer for the January 6th Select Committee that actually was the person who drafted the subpoena before Benny Thompson signed off on it. And remember, Steve Bannon is being charged with violating the subpoena. Somebody had to write that. Who was it? Well, it was this woman right here. Her name is Kristen Ammerling. She was the first witness and really the only real substantive witness that came out of this trial. And she was the person who was detailing what happened with the motion and so on. Yesterday, we also had a FBI agent, Stephen Hart was there. He testified. We heard a little bit about his testimony. Basically, the only thing he really explained to us was that there was some posts from Steve Bannon on Getter, right? Remember that whole saga, Steve Bannon saying, all hell's going to break loose, or posting it on Getter. And the defense attorney came out and said, excuse me, Mr. FBI agent, can you even prove that Steve Bannon posted that in the first place? Like, do you know that he was sitting there on his phone typing away on Getter? No, you can't prove that. So, this is sort of one of the defenses that the defense is going to use as we get down into it. But that was yesterday. Today, of course, we are on day 4. We're going to take a look at the court docket and see what's going on there. But you'll notice, right, there's not a whole lot of activity that we're going to get into today because it was kind of a short trial. I was really hopeful that I would get the transcripts. I really sort of enjoy getting the transcripts because we can just see exactly what happened, but they are still not coming in. So again, I posted yesterday's. If you're looking for the transcripts for yesterday's, here they are. I posted them, but they came in, again, very late and out of order. And so, I'm just not sure that we're going to have anything sort of useful coming out of the transcript process on this case, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. Now, that being said, what we are going to do is take a look at the defense Rule 29 motion. This is a motion for a judgment of acquittal, right? This is Bannon saying, all right, we're in the middle of this thing, Judge, and now this case is going to go over to the jurors, but before they hear it, we think that Bannon should be acquitted. We think that he should actually, the government has failed to meet their burden. We don't even need to give this case to the jury because it was so bad. They don't even need to make a decision, Judge, because on the facts, on the law, you're the individual who can just tell us that this can all be dismissed right now. They have failed to make their case. So we'll take a look at that. And then we're also going to look at sort of a renewed motion because the judge is also going to be considering this motion. He's going to rule on both of these motions tomorrow. I'm sorry, that's not true. He's going to rule on both of these motions after there is a verdict. So if Bannon comes out and is acquitted, then these are going to be irrelevant, moot motions, right? They don't have any consequence because he's acquitted. He's not guilty. There's nothing necessary to really unpack there. But if Bannon is found guilty, then the defense is going to want to renew both of these motions, a judgment for acquittal. And here is a motion to dismiss, which are two different things. Okay, so we're talking about two different things. One is dismiss the indictment. The other is acquit him based on the facts that we have uncovered at trial. They result in the same thing, right? That the case is gone. It's, Bannon is freed, but they're different sort of mechanisms. And so there was a little bit of nuance there, but we are going to go through that as well. We've got several different clips. Several different links from or different reports from Sarah Lynch. Sarah Lynch was there day 4 of the Steve Bannon trial, so we'll take a look at what she is reporting for us. And we also have John Haughey over from the Epoch Times, and he has a very nice Twitter thread as well. And so we'll read through both of those together so that we can understand exactly what's going on. And of course, I know that today we do have the January 6th Select Committee is supposed to be scheduled for a hearing. I was not able to find a lot of this. Okay, so here it is, right? CBS looks like people are watching, or PBS people are watching this one. So this may be popping up here. Let's see what they've got. Is this going on right now? Oh, it is going on. It's literally going on right now. Oh, January 6th started streaming 71 minutes ago. Okay, so this is not the hearing. This is the recap over from PBS. So they're doing there it is. So it's not the actual hearing. The hearing, I think, starts in about 1 hour from now. And we are not going to be covering it. Maybe we'll get to it at the end, but it's, what is it, the 8th one already? I mean, look, we'll unpack it certainly tomorrow, but I really don't want to sort of punish all of us by indulging it in sitting through the whole thing. But we have been covering it because Steve Bannon's case is right in the middle of this, right? At the j6mindmap.com, you can see that in addition to Bannon's entire sort of timeline that we fleshed out here, including all of the jurors, we also can see that we've been covering the hearings, right? And so here I see one user, looks like Dan is over there. Dan is checking out the Eliminate Trump Voters saga at J6 Mind Map. But all of the hearings, we've covered all of the hearings, right? And the committee and so on and so forth. The insurrection hearings, they're all detailed down here. And so today we are on, it looks like we're on episode number 8. Whatever the theme is, we'll figure whatever that is tomorrow. But that is 07/21, 2021. And, I'm not even sure if it's going to be the last one, because recall that Raskin said there may be more. He said something like this some time ago. Yeah, we might have more hearings.
The Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Why was it so important for your committee today to highlight the personal impact? All
right, so you get the gist of it. We'll get into some of that later. But those hearings are well underway, and they're going to be starting in about 42 minutes. Over on Rumble Rants, Blue Peahen says, "Thank you for not torturing us with the committee hearing." And you're welcome. I know. Myself as well. I don't want to torture myself. So they had to wait. Okay, over on, well, I guess let me back up now. This is what we are covering today. And so if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I see everybody in the community chatting away over there. Zach Nichols, JC the Music Man is there. We have Tweaks in the house. And resident Bedoin, Kelly Sell now, says, "I enjoy Rob's transcript reading voiceovers," because they're a little bit silly, aren't they? They're fun, though. Zach Nichols is here, and they're chatting away. All right. Phantasmagloria. Shout out to Phantasmagloria in the house as well. Over at our locals community on Rumble, we've got Cat Crap Fevers in the house, along with Blue PN, Bastiat 1776, and Elucidation Station over on Rumble Rants. And shout out to the mods modding up the place. We've got Lean, Just Cause are both here playing hooky number 1. Peas and Butter is a YouTube member who is here. Shout out to Peas and Butter. And who else? We don't have any other YouTube members here? Oh, there he is. ZZ the Boxing Cat. Shout out to Talbert's mom, Serafinos, Leon Kingsley, Andrew Richardson, and others. And right, as I said, the place to be is at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. So come out and check our community out. We do the daily walk and talks, which are a lot of fun. The sort of, we're just sort of hitting the highlights early on in the morning. Some of the, the headlines, we just kind of hit those real quick. It's low production quality. It's just me running around. This is kind of what this morning's look like. Just walking around the neighborhood.
It's a beautiful Thursday, my friends. Hope your week is coming to a nice, beautiful close.
Hey, that's me. That's really weird. All right. So that's me. If you want to check out that, right? This morning's was short, about 19, 20 minutes, but we just get some headlines and we attend to the news. And so I appreciate your support, whether you join on Locals or join on YouTube. And if you, as a reminder, if you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona who has been charged with a crime, I would very much appreciate your referral over to our amazing law firm, the R&R Law Group. We offer free case evaluations, and we really are passionate about helping people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that, in their lives. 480-787-0394. All right, my friends, and now let's get back to it, shall we? So, Steve Bannon is in the house. He is scheduled for trial day 4, and we are going to go through that in detail today. But as a quick reminder, we left off with the prosecution resting yesterday. They're done. They presented 2 witnesses and they're done. And a big part of our conversation about this was, what is this trial going to look like? Is Steve Bannon going to present any evidence at all? Because if you remember, when we were up here in the pretrial phase and we go up, we scroll all the way up. Remember, we had these oral arguments and Bannon actually agreed to testify in the moments leading right up until the trial. The trial started on 7/18, okay, just about Monday, not long ago. And on oral arguments on the 11th, the week before, there were all sorts of arguments. Bannon was saying, now Donald Trump has withdrawn his executive privilege, so I can come in and testify. And what Bannon wanted is he also wanted to subpoena Benny Thompson, who's got COVID right now, along with Joe Biden, who I thought Joe Biden told us that if you get it, the jab, then you're not going to get the vid, right? He said something like that when he was the president. And he's been vaxxed like 37 times and, he's got the COVID. So I hope he's doing well. I think Benny Thompson's probably in the very same situation, but Bannon wanted Thompson to come into court and to testify. He sent him a subpoena. And so today, as you're going to see, we've got 2 big nuggets to get into. We've got the defense Rule 29 motion for a judgment of acquittal, which we'll go through. It's a pretty short motion, only 5 pages or so. And then we're going to spend some time on this sort of renewed motion because Bannon and his defense, they're saying that the case should be dismissed because Bannon didn't get the opportunity to call his witnesses, right? He couldn't issue a subpoena to Benny Thompson or any of the J6ers. And so now they're saying that is a problem. He didn't get a fair shake. There's no due process here, and the case ultimately needs to be dismissed. So we're going to get into that. Now, in order to do that, since we do not have transcripts in yet, let me just do a quick refresh and confirm that they have not been emailed since I started. Oh, darn it. Okay, so they're not here. I was hoping that they might be here because it was a shorter day in court, but that's not obviously going to happen. All right, so instead, we are going to go over to the estimable Sarah N. Lynch. She is reporting over from Reuters, and I haven't really been able to tease out her politics, and so that's why I sort of like referring back over to her. But she was there, bright and early in the morning. 7:31 was there in court, the D.C. Circuit Court, and she says, all right, good morning, everybody. The day is expected to open with the defense making arguments, and now the judge enters the room, and we begin. The defense wants to discuss 2 proposed jury instructions. Remember, this case is about to get handed off to the jurors, and the defense hasn't even presented any evidence yet, and so they're starting to piece together and sort of tease out these very important jury instructions. Judge Nichols, he says, well, hold on a minute here, defense. Before we get into this, I'm a little bit concerned that, yesterday when you were making your arguments, yesterday in court, apparently, the defense said that they wanted to notify the court that they were intending to file a motion to dismiss or a motion or judgment for acquittal. And now, apparently, the defense said that in front of the jurors, right? Said, hey, judge, this case is dog garbage. And so what I'm going to do is file a motion to dismiss because of whatever. And the judge is like, the jurors can hear you. Hello. You can't say that stuff in front of jurors because you don't want them to sort of pick up on it. And same thing for the prosecutors, right? You don't want the prosecutors to sort of say things that might implement or impose upon the jurors something that they're not supposed to be thinking about. And so the judge is saying, well, before we get into all this stuff this morning, everybody, I want to make sure, I think the jurors might have heard that motion to dismiss. And so, I've got a problem with that. Now, the defense, Bannon's defense says, judge, it's not going to be a problem. Just tell them that this is pretty normal and not to be a big deal. So you can sort of fix that in the jury instructions or during the deliberation. You heard them talk about a judgment of acquittal. Just tell them, don't worry about that. Okay, it should work. So then Corcoran, the defense lawyer for Bannon, says, Your Honor, we're here today with several motions. And first and foremost, we're asking the court to grant our motion for a judgment of acquittal, which was filed last night, right? So let's take a look at that. But before, let's see what his argument says. He says the government has rested its case and they have not presented evidence upon which a reasonable person can find beyond a reasonable doubt that Bannon is guilty. Okay, we talked about this yesterday. Every time we have one of these criminal trials, there are a lot of headlines that fly around about, a motion to dismiss or a motion for a judgment of acquittal. Oh my gosh. Well, it's pretty standard, right? At the conclusion of the government's case, there is a rule. Let me see if I clipped it. I think that I did. Yes, here it is. Okay. At the conclusion of the government's case, here's the rule from the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, very important, Rule 29. And they're going to be talking about Rule 29 a lot, so I just want to give you the highlights on what this rule means. It's this: after the government closes its evidence, or after the close of all the evidence, so right now the government just rested yesterday at the end of the day, the court on the defendant's motion, so the defense now says, making a motion, the court must enter a judgment of acquittal of any offense for which the evidence is insufficient to sustain a conviction. Okay, so you can see this can happen all the time. You know, a criminal prosecution is sort of like a recipe. You've got a number of different elements or ingredients that you need to insert into the recipe in order for the dish to turn out delicious. And if you miss one of those ingredients on there and you sort of do the recipe wrong, well, guess what? You don't hit all the elements of the offense. And now the government, even though you may have done it or whatever, like the government can't prove it. And because of the standard that we have in our country about the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof being on the government, like I said, and I've said this many times before, it's not a good strategy in most cases, but the defense does not have to offer any defense if they don't want to, right? And this rule gives them the ability to do that. It says if they have failed to enter evidence, right, at the close of evidence, the court on the defendant's motion, if there is evidence insufficient to sustain a conviction, it's got to be dismissed. Obviously, right? It makes sense, but you got to have a rule for it in order to rely on it. And so every single defense lawyer ever, of all time, go at the end of the government's case, and you have different local rules. Your local rule is going to be a Rule 20 or whatever, and you're going to make that argument at the conclusion of the government's case. Even if they presented an amazing case, you still say, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. This is unbelievable. That was your case? Gosh, judge, let me explain what a bunch of morons they are, right? And you get up there and you make that argument. So the court may on its own consider whether the evidence is insufficient to sustain a conviction. So this goes over to the judge. If the court denies a motion for a judgment of acquittal at the close of evidence, the defendant may offer evidence without having reserved the right to do so. Reserving a decision, and the judge, as the judge is going to do in this case, the judge may reserve the decision on the motion, proceed with the trial, submit the case to the jury, and decide on the motion before the jury returns a verdict or after it returns a verdict. If the court reserves a decision, it must decide the motion on the basis of evidence at the time the ruling was reserved, okay? So now, right, the judge is going to be holding this off on till the later time. But that's it, right? It's a very generic motion, and it is basically saying that you get a motion for a new trial. Now, on this point, right, I have sort of made that prognostication that one theory of Bannon's defense is to say, we didn't get a fair shake at trial, and so I don't even want to attempt to make my arguments. I don't even want to put a case on, because if I do, then the court, when this goes up to the Court of Appeals, they're going to say, you already took a swing at that ball, so you don't get another swing at it, right? You only get to swing once, and if you hit it, you hit it. But if Bannon goes out there and in this lower level trial or at this first trial, if he puts on his defense, then when this case does go up on appeal, the court might be more inclined to say, you already had a shot at this, my friend. You don't get another opportunity. But if Bannon, as his defense did today, doesn't present any evidence whatsoever, they just sort of say, judge, this was an unfair trial. I'm not going to put Bannon up there. I'm not going to put his lawyer up there, because they're not going to be able to talk about anything relevant. They're not even going to be able to get into it because of your ridiculous rulings. And so what we're going to do is just not put up any defense at all. We're going to enter in at a hard level this motion. We're really going to be aggressive on this motion and take this up on appeal and demand that it goes back down for a new trial. And as we talked about, I think here on Tuesday with Viva and Joe, Viva Fry next door on YouTube, so go check out his channel, and also Joe Neerman at Good Logic on YouTube. So please go check out his channel as well. And, these two guys are doing great work. And we were talking about the appeals and how this process might work. And I think that is actually the strategy. I mean, we're actually seeing that come out in full swing. And so now let's get back to the actual motion that we have here at hand. And this is it. This is the judgment, the Rule 29 motion. So before we get into Sarah Lynch's actual... one second. After we get into Sarah Lynch's, I'm trying to download this, but it's being very difficult for me. Sarah Lynch has an amazing Twitter thread, and we are going to get to that, but we do need to read through and mark up this document first. And so let's do that now. This is the motion. You can see it is 5 pages long, so it's not that long. We're going to get our red pen out here and zoom in on this so we can see it. This was filed today, this morning, 7:21 at probably, bright and early this morning. So this, as you can see, United States of America versus Steve Bannon, motion for judgment of acquittal pursuant to Rule 29, which was the rule that we just saw. It says, defendant Stephen Bannon is now here with his lawyers and the undersigned, and they tell us what Rule 29 allows us to do. Okay, Rule 29, we've already talked about that. But it tells us here, the court must determine whether the evidence viewed, okay, all of the evidence that's been presented now, everything that has come out on behalf of Steve Bannon, the judge must view the evidence in a light most favorable to the government, giving full play to the right of the trier of fact to determine credibility, weigh the evidence, and draw justifiable inference of fact. A reasonable mind might conclude guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And so that's kind of the standard that they're establishing through the case law. We just read the rule, but there's also case law here. And it tells us the defense is arguing. They say, look, Your Honor, that's the standard. Let me put this another way for you. He says that right here. Put another way, the court must grant a motion for a judgment of acquittal. In other words, Bannon is acquitted if a reasonable juror must necessarily have had reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. Have had a reasonable doubt, right? And this is something that we say a lot in criminal law. It's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Guilty beyond reasonable doubt. But if it's any doubt, like if you have any doubt in your mind and it's based in reason, okay, it's another way to say that, and it's a little bit more of a powerful way to say it. You got to prove somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. A different way is you have to prove somebody guilty. And if you have any doubt in your mind, there's maybe 1,000 doubts, maybe 1,000 potential doubts. And if any one of those is even reasonable, remotely reasonable, you have to find the defendant not guilty, because it's got to be beyond not any reasonable doubt, but all reasonable doubt, right? All of the elements. And that's something we make arguments about in court. It says, if there is no evidence upon which a reasonable mind might fairly conclude guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the motion must be granted. And so they're saying, Judge, that the prosecutors here, they haven't even presented enough to get over that hurdle, and it's their burden to do it. And so, Judge, you've got to dismiss this case. Although the evidence must be viewed in a light most favorable to the government, right? This is the non-moving party. We want to give the government the benefit of the doubt here. This court is obligated to take a hard look at the evidence and accord the government the benefit of only the legitimate inferences. Okay, so not everything that they said, but only the legitimate things. In other words, writes the defense, the court will not indulge in fanciful speculation or bizarre reconstruction of the evidence. And Rule 29, the one that we just read, does not require the court to view the evidence through dirty window panes and assume the evidence, which otherwise can be explained as equally innocent, must be evidence of guilt. So they can't sort of put on these glasses that muck up everything. Rather, writes the defense, in order to find a legitimate and non-speculative inference of guilt, the government must articulate a rational basis in the evidence upon which that inference can arise. So they got to sort of really articulate what that legitimate, non-speculative inference is. So we're going to get into this in a minute. But this is what they're arguing about in court this morning. The court must grant, writes Bannon's defense, they must grant Bannon's motion for a judgment of acquittal if it finds that the evidence, even if viewed in a light most favorable to the government, is such that a reasonable trier of fact, in this case the judge or the jurors, would have a reasonable doubt as to the existence of any of the essential elements of the crime. Okay, so this goes back to the ingredients analogy, right? If you're going to bake a cake and you leave out, I don't know, I've never baked a cake ever in my whole life, but do eggs go in there? Maybe they do. If you leave out the eggs, if you're baking a cake, well, maybe it doesn't turn out any good. I don't know. I should probably use a better example. But that's what this argument is saying. They're saying that here, if any of those elements, if those eggs are missing, Judge, then there's no way a jury can possibly convict him. Because there's no eggs. Even if they're deluded enough to think that, yeah, there's probably eggs in this cake, they're not in there, right? So you have to, judge, as a matter of law, dump this. So now we get into some argument. Okay. So this is where the defense is laying out the rules. And in the law, we talk a lot about a format called IRAC: issue, rule, analysis or argument, and conclusion. And so this is sort of following that. We just got all the rules. We know what the issue is. We just got all the rules. It's all this case law. DC Circuit 1981, DC Circuit 1986, blah, blah, blah. But now it says, Mr. Bannon is charged with 2 counts of contempt of Congress. The court has advised that it will provide the jury with the following instructions about the elements of the offense. This is the ingredients. Here's the ingredients. First, that the defendant was subpoenaed by the select committee to provide testimony or produce papers. So literally, if you're going to the grocery store, that's the list. Do we have a defendant? Yes, we do. Bannon. Did he get a subpoena? Check. Yes, we do. Where'd it come from? The select committee. Okay, got that one. And how about to provide testimony? Okay, got that. And produce papers. So that's what the subpoena requires. So now we've got to prove that there was a violation of those things, right? Second, that the subpoena sought testimony or information pertinent to the investigation that the committee was authorized to conduct. So evidence had to be presented in that manner. Committee was legal and lawful. A lot of that has already been presented by Miss Ammerling. And then third, that the defendant failed to comply or refused to comply with the subpoena, right? Didn't comply. And that's the breach. So you have to sort of the establishment of what was going on, the authority to do that in section 2. Number 3, the breach of the law. And then number 4, the mens rea, the willfulness. Okay, so this is what the jury is literally going to be looking at. They're going to say, okay, defendant was willful. Let's check that one. Failed to comply, refused to comply. Check that one. We'll say authorized to conduct it. Okay, check that one. And he got a valid subpoena. Got that one. So there was a breach, and then they're going to just try to connect all of it. Now, what the defense is saying is that there is no possible way here that they could possibly bake a cake with these ingredients. No way. Even if they think they can't hit those. So let's explain. Let's see how they are unpacking that. Factual background and argument. Now, this is it. Here it is. It says the factual background relevant to this motion. They were stated on the record on July 21st, 2022. By this motion, Mr. Bannon reasserts the arguments asserted on the record. So we're going to go back to a different motion. So there's not much there. Wherefore, the reason stated on July 21, the defendant respectfully requests this court grant his motion for a judgment of acquittal. Here's the certificate of service. This was argued, written by Evan Corcoran and David Schoen. So now that is signed off, right? And now let's take a look at the other motion, because I think that is this one. So here, this argument or this motion, okay, we're going to come back to this second one. This is the motion to dismiss. So now that we know what that underlying motion that they were talking about was, the Rule 29, let's go back to Miss Lynch and see what she has to say for us. So now they're arguing over this motion. Okay, so it got filed first thing in the morning, first thing, overnight or whatever. And so now they have to sort of hash this out in front of the judge. The judge says, oh, I got your motion at 6 a.m. I hadn't even finished my coffee yet, but I read it and I have some questions. So he says, Mr. Corcoran, your motion, what do you have to say about this motion? And so Corcoran says, all right, Judge, well, it's pretty easy. Kristen Ammerling was one of the government's witnesses. She came up here, and from her own testimony, we can see that the dates of the subpoena were flexible. Okay, they were fluid. They could move around a little bit. We know they said that he had to be there on the 7th and the 14th, but when he was not there on the 7th, Benny sent him a letter signed off on, or actually drafted by Kristen Ammerling, that said specifically, you can continue to comply with us after the fact. Just because you weren't here on the 7th doesn't mean that I'm all freaked out. You're not in violation of the law or anything. You just have to comply after the fact. Go and comply, and we'll be okay with that. So in other words, what the defense is arguing, there was no breach on the 8th. The subpoena didn't have any teeth to it, didn't have any claws. They just said be here, and he wasn't there, and there was no real consequences. That's why he's saying the elements of the offense are not being met, because they can't prove the breach. The breach has to be tied to the 7th or the 14th date when he was supposed to show up, but they sort of excused his not showing up on that letter in the 8th, according to the defense. So Sarah tells us, okay, and I don't know who Corcoran says, she was unable to identify why those dates at all. She was not even able to explain why they picked those dates. 7th, the 14th. Miss Amerling, why'd you come up with those dates? I don't recall. Remember that? Corcoran says, we were not provided with key witnesses also, Judge, who we believe provided exculpatory evidence. So we could have Benny Thompson here. He says, if Benny Thompson were here, we would have presented evidence to the jury. I believe that he was not the author of those letters. So they were not, in fact, an official position of the committee. Bannon is obligated to respond to legal subpoenas. Bannon didn't get a subpoena from Benny Thompson. He got a subpoena from Kristen Amerling, the White House lawyer. She's not in the House of Representatives, and she wrote the letter and drafted the subpoena. Benny just signed off on it. So what Corcoran says is that no reasonable juror could find Bannon refused to comply with the dates. The dates were open, they were fluid, and they were in flux. The October 18th deadline to respond to the committee, and those dates were not set in stone, according to the defense. But Nichols says, all right, hold on a minute. This is the judge. The judge says, hey, Corcoran, hold on a minute. The indictment says by October 18th, okay? By October 18th, not on October 18th deadline. So it says by 18th, which is a little different. Corcoran says, okay, still, it doesn't matter because after the 18th, it's still not like this thing evaporates. So then the judge says, okay, well, that's interesting. So why don't we hear from the opposing side, the prosecutor? The prosecutor comes out now and tells us Amanda Vaughn, and Amanda Vaughn is the prosecuting attorney. She's there along with Molly Gaston, and part of the debate yesterday, remember, was the cross-examination of Kristen Amerling was that she was way too close with some of these prosecutors. In fact, they're saying that she was actually in a book club with one of these prosecutors, that Kristen Amerling and Molly Gaston from The Beauty and the Beast is somebody who were reading books together. And now they're in trial together, dunking on Bannon. So Vaughn gets up and she says, she says, Judge, this case should not be dismissed. Okay. Obviously there's no acquittals here. She says the government has presented sufficient evidence. Okay. This is ridiculous. She says the reason for the dates are irrelevant. Why it was the 7th or the 14th doesn't matter at all. They could make it the 35th or 38th or it doesn't matter. The dates are on the subpoena, she says. The committee made clear in its letters to the defendant that those were the dates and they had violated them. That's all that matters, she says. She also says the government has no burden to show who actually crafted the subpoenas, and that's not an ingredient. I don't need to show you where it came from or the dates. That's not a recipe. That's not part of the recipe either. All of that, she says, is irrelevant. The cake doesn't need any of that stuff. The body of the committee subpoenaed the defendant. In other words, the January 6th committee as an entire entity, they sent the subpoena, and Kristen Amerling was just one component of that, right? I don't go to court on every single case, right? But my law firm does. Okay. So that's sort of the body argument versus the Benny Thompson and the authorization argument. Vaughn says, Judge, the jury, they may have heard about that motion to dismiss, but they probably don't even know what that means. So I'm not worried about that either. If you remind them about the motion to dismiss, because remember, the judge at the beginning of this thing, the judge says, hey, I got a problem here, ladies and gentlemen, prosecutor to defense. The jurors were in here last night and I heard the defense make an argument for a motion to dismiss and I forgot to excuse the jurors. So I think they heard that. I think they heard the defense saying, Judge, we're going to file a motion to dismiss because the garbage case is weak. The prosecution's case is garbage. And the judge said, I should probably correct that, right? I probably should just tell the jurors, hey, remember that motion to dismiss where the defense said the prosecution's case was garbage? Just forget about that. And the prosecution is saying, Judge, don't even remind them. They don't need to remind them of that at all. Okay. I was there. I heard it. Vaughn says, I'm not too concerned about anybody who is involved in this, noting that most jurors likely don't even know what it means, reminding them that it might do more harm than good. And so the government says, we don't even think that there has been any prejudice at all. We just don't think that there's been anything that harms our case. So now they're going under seal for a discussion. There's a 5-minute recess. Sarah Lynch is there, and we fast forward right through it. The judge comes out and he says, all right, we're back on the record in the case of U.S. versus Bannon, and here's my ruling on this thing. says Nichols is going to reserve judgment on the motion for acquittal. Going to hold off on that. He does not want the jury to be prejudiced in any way, thinking that he has passed judgment, right? So I'm going to hold on to this. He's not going to remind the jury about the defense motion. And Dave Schoen says, all right, thank you, Judge, for your ruling. Is Nate in the house? Is Nate here? Is Nate in the house? Nate, I got to send you a link. Do you want to hop on, brother? Let me send you a link here 1 second. I think I sent Nate a message, but I didn't send him a link. So let me see if I can pull that up, because Nate, it'd be cool to talk to Nate. I saw him poking around earlier. Nate, I use Zoom for this, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a delay on the video, but that's only because I am using Streamlabs OBS. So I'm setting this up right now. 1 second. And I think this will work. Apologies, everybody. We're going to see if we can sort of do this on the fly. I was skidding in here today, and I did not set this up. So, all right. So I think I have this set up. And if Nate is in the house, we are going to try to get him on. All right. So my point, I don't know what the heck I was talking about here, but we are here with Sarah Lynch. And the judge now comes out and he says, we are not going to remind the jurors about the defense motion. We are not going to sort of reiterate this because it could cause them to sort of think about it even more. We're just going to allow that all to fly and go right out the window. So now it says, okay, David Schoen, Bannon's defense lawyer, if that's my ruling, the case is now yours. What would you like to do with this? You're up now, right? The defense, you're done. The prosecution just rested yesterday, and now it's your case. So David Schoen stands up and he says, okay, well, Judge, it's pretty easy. We have no plans to put on a case for the jury. Oh, no case? Not going to put on any case at all? No evidence? Yeah, that's right. No witnesses called. No evidence presented by Bannon's team. Whoa! How does that happen? So we talked about this with Nate and with Joe, and then everybody sort of catches their breath and they realize that this is over, right? And this caught a lot of people by surprise today, actually, because Bannon was saying that he was going to make this a living hell for everybody, right? It's going to be a war, and he can't wait to get out there and testify. And then he didn't. And so a lot of people in the media are kind of dunking on him, saying, yeah, real tough, a lot of bravado out there, until it's time to put your money where your mouth is. And I'm not so sure about that, right? The right to remain silent, the right to not testify against yourself is one of the most important foundational rights that we have here in this country. And Bannon invoking that or accepting that and using that, I think, is a pretty smart decision. But the other reason for this, the other reason I thought that they might be doing this is because they want to bring this case back down on appeal, right? They sort of don't want to present the case so that if it does go up, then they have an opportunity to make the argument to the judge to say that we never got a fair trial, we never got a clean shake, and we should get one. All right. And so I got Nate, the lawyer, is in the house. Now I have to sort of, Nate, can you hear me, my friend? I'm going to be pulling you on the screen right there. And I think I can see you there. Nate, can you hear me, Nate? I don't. Sometimes my Zoom audio can be a little bit wonky, so let me see what I'm doing. I apologize. My Zoom audio just got wonky. Nate, can you hear me now? No, Nate cannot hear me now. All right, so Nate is here. Nate, give me 1 second. Look, Nate, look, my friends, Nate is here. He's actually on, he's here with us, but he cannot hear me. So hang on 1 second. All right, we are testing. Now I want to see if I can get Nate here and join on this
Another
audio.
program. There it is.
There
Got
you
now.
are. You got me? Oh, my goodness. Sorry about that. It's like amateur hour over here, my friend.
No, I thought your audio might have been pumping through something, another thing. So I was like, maybe at this one, I'm not getting audio.
It was. So I use Streamlabs and I try to connect everything so I can do the switcher and sort of connect everything in together, and it turns into this big mess. But Nate, thank you so much.
Same thing for me.
Thanks for stopping by, my friend. It's been so long. We've sort of been circling each other. We've covered a lot of the same trials. And,
Oh yeah.
And I know you're super busy. What's been the latest? I heard you were on vacation. Is that right? Or did you just go anywhere?
Yeah, I was on vacation. We went to Houston. I went to California for Alita's wedding. I don't know if you know Legal Bites. She had a wedding. We went to there. Now we're about to head to Florida and see Viva. So we're gonna, we're doing like the family summer of Brody. That's what we're calling it. Summer of Brody.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I was really sorry I couldn't catch you guys. I was actually scheduled to go out to Legal Bites' wedding, and then on Tuesday, my girlfriend called me like that morning. We were scheduled to leave on Thursday. She called me and she's tested positive for COVID twice that morning, and so we had to like cancel everything. And it's just like, like I was so bummed. I saw the pictures with you and Joe and the whole crew out there, and it was pretty cool.
No, we had a great time. It's funny because I like usually when I listen to your stream, because about this time I work out and I play with the kids, so I just like put headphones on, but so I don't usually chat. So I'm like, dude, so last time I was like, I'm gonna chat once, and now I'm chatting. Now I'm on the stream. I was like, oh my god, I should have been chatting earlier. I listen to you all the time, and I never chat.
No, I really appreciate that. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you said something because it's collaborating with people. You've got a lot more experience than I do, but I sort of feel like I'm sort of dragging people into these things, and so it's just cool that we were able to sync up on this. But you stopped by, and I think you were with Viva earlier. I saw you sort of on his show, and you've been following Bannon.
Yes, I have been following Bannon. First, I just want to let everybody understand how I feel about this case.
Sure.
This is obviously a political trial. Anybody who's telling you something different don't know what they're talking about. This trial is straight politics, right? If Bannon wasn't Bannon, he would not be facing prosecution for a misdemeanor crime. It just does not happen. When was the last time you heard somebody being prosecuted in a jury trial for something like this?
Right.
It just don't happen. So under that aspect, I believe that Bannon is in a no-lose situation. I think Bannon wins no matter what. If he gets convicted, he wins, right? Because he shut his mouth for Trump, and when Trump gets back in there, because I think Biden's going down in flames, he's getting his part, right? You kept your mouth shut, you stayed true to the cause, you're going to get out of it. And even if he doesn't, it's a misdemeanor, right? So he can still carry a gun and everything. But then if he wins, he's beat the machine. So in one way, he's a martyr. The other way, he bends the machine. So that's why. What do you think he's just sitting pretty? He's like, it doesn't really even matter if I win or lose. I've already won.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I was sort of, I'm a defense lawyer, and so these things sort of make me anxious when I see clients who are like kind of giddy and like not taking the process seriously. They kind of just like, well, whatever. And I kind of noticed that with Bannon. But I've also never represented somebody who has been charged with contempt of Congress, through a January 6th select committee. And so like this whole thing is, not normal. It's not in the normal realm of possibilities. And I've noticed, like sort of like you mentioned, Bannon, he doesn't feel to me like he's all that nervous. He just sort of kind of laughing and kind of, addressing the media, because I think, like you said, he kind of knows if he kind of wins either way.
Yeah, but it's a misdemeanor. Like really, this is a misdemeanor. But I also think it exposes two things. I think it does expose the fact that whoever is in office, whether this goes far, because if it's Trump's guy, we're not at trial. Matter of fact, he's not even charged, right? So it does understand the underlying politics of it all. And I think second, it also it really exposes the fact that no matter how much we want to keep the courts out of the political process, it's part of the political process, and this isn't being used in a certain way. And I think that realization now is what Bannon is trying to expose.
Yeah, does that make you nervous at all? I mean, did you used to be a prosecutor, or what was your background?
I was a prosecutor. I was in law enforcement for 10 years,
okay.
and then I became a prosecutor. I went to law school. My job actually helped pay for all my college. So I worked for the city, and then so I paid for everything. So I paid for law school and undergrad. Then I became a prosecutor. So I did that. And that was fun. That was pretty fun. It's pretty crazy to on some of the cases. My last case was like a baby. It was a baby smuggling case that had roots in Nigeria. It was like insane. Like I'm like babies in Nigeria, like because they have, and a lot of people don't know this. They actually have, I call them baby farms, but where they take women and bring them to these places and make them have babies, and then put the babies on the market for adoption.
Wow.
And there's a cost to all that, but there's like an actual So this was, so I heard about this one. I didn't even know people would go this far, but yeah, people like they sell babies, which is kind of like, which now that you hear about it, you're like, it's kind of insane. Not, hopefully, but that's not going to get us demonetized, right? That's not too crazy, right?
No, I think that's
all right.
I think that's okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I didn't want to get too
no, you're good. I appreciate.
I'm like, I'm afraid. But those all those cases really it had an effect on me. Then after that I taught at law school for 2 years.
Wow.
And I was so I was a professor at a law school for 2 years, and then I became the director of a program there. And then after that, kind of COVID happened, and it was whether I was going to go back to teach. It's funny, the whole reason I don't want to really make this fully about me, but the whole reason I started YouTube was because I when I was teaching in law school, I was putting some of my law school classes on YouTube, so my students can see it later. And someone just someone just found him and was like, this sounds like Nate the lawyer. So they sent it to me, and I was like, yeah, that's me when I was teaching at the law schools in my classes, because I'm just recording the PowerPoints. But those were and that was the thing that got me into YouTube, because one video I did on constitutional jurisdiction got something like 1,000 views. And I know for you it's like nothing that now, but I remember back then I had like 2 subscribers on the channel. I got like 1,000 views. I'm like, who the hell's watching this thing?
Yeah.
So then they said, okay, well, if people like this, I can give them more and more. So that's kind of like my background, from law enforcement to the DA's office to college professor, and now YouTube. Yeah, and
now you're covering on your channel, right? Do you have like specific cases, or do you cover specific areas, or kind of like the general topical legal stuff? Like, kind of what's your focus?
My focus really, I've always been fascinated with law enforcement. So I was always doing the police shooting cases, but YouTube doesn't like that. Yeah, and then they started demonetizing. Like they had at one time, they were threatening to like demonetize. I was getting close to demonetizing my whole channel.
I got
every video I put up.
I got mine for 9 months for that. Right, I was covering all of those. Ooh. That was kind of how I got my start on the channel, and they struck my whole channel for 9 months for that stuff.
For all the police shooting,
for all the shootings, yeah, basically anything that was like flagged over 18, kind of anything that gets any of those flags and stuff. Yeah, they struck the whole channel, and it took me 9 months to get that back. It was a tough one. Yeah,
because I know that I was getting close. So I was like, you know what, I gotta change content. So now I just do I'm just strictly with legal stuff, but I specialize. Somebody asked me what I specialize in. I specialize in cases that the media lies to you about.
Okay.
For instance, Breonna Taylor.
Yep.
Breonna Taylor's a lot of stuff, but the media, remember, they said she was sleeping in her bed and all that stuff. All that wasn't true. Then so that video did well. U.S. Soccer, come to find out, the women weren't underpaid. They were getting paid more than the men.
Yes, that video of yours, I watched that one, and that one blew up. Yeah, that was a great one.
And then now Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. So whenever the media is telling you one thing and I see it's full of lies, I do exactly the same thing you do. You do the same every night.
Yeah, well, that's.
You do the same thing.
Well, we're in good company. I really love the community that we've built. It's a pretty cool thing. And, the way that you guys have circled up and been able to sort of, have these really intense, long streams. It's a pretty cool thing. But now you're focusing on Bannon, and
yes,
and you're sort of back in the office. What did you think about, Bannon maybe today, some stuff that happened today? He didn't testify. Did you think that was a good move? Were you sort of expecting that? Or did you think that maybe he was gonna, kind of do like a war room, speech or something like that?
You're a defense attorney, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, if you don't have to put the norm is not to put the client up, unless it's like the only way we can prove self-defense. You got to go up, right? Because we got to prove self-defense. Otherwise, you're like, you're not going up there especially if we really don't have to. I think in this case, I think you sit back, because this is really a paper case when it comes to prosecution, right? Here's a subpoena. This is what it says. He didn't do it. We're done, right? And then a couple of his mens rea, right? Did you intentionally do it versus did you willfully do it? That type of thing. So that's really the mix up here. It's not whether he's complied with the subpoena. It's his mens rea in the act of not complying. Like, you get the getter stuff and all that stuff. Like, he said he wasn't going to do it. He said all these things. So that's where they're really trying to get to that mens rea point. Did he willfully or intentionally do this? So I think putting him on the stand, that opens him up to a lot of questions that I don't think he wants to hear. Right? So I think right now you say, well, if it's really on a paper case, where it's just this right now, what more can you do? You can either tell the jury to kind of just ignore everything and try to make arguments. But I think when you weigh it, I think it was a smart move because again, him coming out of this, whichever way it ends for him, I think is a plus. I don't think if Bannon gets convicted, I think that's a win for Bannon politically.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I was thinking that it would really animate a lot of people who might be off the sidelines. Like there might be people who are kind of in the middle. When I describe what happened on January 6th, and I think that hearing is starting in any minute now. I want to talk to you about that too. But when we talk about January 6th, there's sort of like two ends of the spectrum. You have people who I'll put it, they'll say, like Joe Biden said, that it was the worst thing since the Civil War. I don't know if you heard that, right? But he said that in the State of the Union.
Yeah, that was crazy.
You go, come on. But then you have people on the other side who sort of like, it's like a lawn chair blew over in a strong breeze or something, right? And it's like, that's not the case.
It's
not quite that either, but we should be somewhere in the middle. And and we can unpack that a little bit more. But I love how you said it was a paper case, and how this was something that was so sort of kind of a cut and dry case. It's the same thing that we've been talking about here. Like the analogy that I used was a driving on a suspended license case, right? And right, like you bring the custodian of records in, and they present it, and that was Ammerling, and then they bring the FBI in for some mens rea stuff, and that's it. But I was sort of surprised by how limited it was. I mean, it really is like a DOSL case or something like that. I mean, it really was.
That's why you only need two witnesses, right?
Yeah.
Authenticate the documents. The subpoena's good, and that's all she wrote. Now, I think Bannon's defense and his defenses that he was trying to bring, I think they were good in a sense of make the judge make the decision, even though I think they were going to lose, because it's just like when we're talking about subpoenas, and I think this is where there may be some confusion. When we talk about the House Select Committee issuing a subpoena, that subpoena is just remove Select Committee and put judge. So if that judge issues a subpoena, like the defendant can't now call, I want to put the judge on the stand and ask why, it's based on the facial validity of the subpoena, right? Another judge is going to say, well, what evidence did the judge look at and determine whether that was probable cause or not? So I thought that was probably the only issue that I think he knew he was going to lose, because again, it's like as soon as they issue that subpoena, the chairman issues, he becomes like the judge. So you can't, you wouldn't be able to call him to testify.
Yeah.
But I do think his arguments of calling other members of Congress to testify was a good argument. And I think him being denied that may give him a little appealable issue, because I'm assuming he's going to appeal automatically.
Yeah.
And even back to the initial issue of him testifying, I think it's just best that he did. I just think it, because those are two questions would be easy. Did you turn over the documents on whatever the date was, October 18th, blah, blah, blah. He says no to that. Did you write this that said I wasn't going to do it? Yes. That's the case. He's admitted it.
What did you think about the argument? I think it's kind of a long shot, but I liked it, that there was the October 7th deadline, and then when he didn't show up, they sent that letter on October 8th. Benny Thompson sent a letter back, and the nuts and bolts sort of for the audience was that it said you're sort of in breach by not showing up on the 7th, but also kind of not. Like there was some language in there that said, if you comply later, we still expect you to give us these documents and all of that. So Bannon's lawyers were saying, well, that wasn't hard and fast, right? That wasn't an actual deadline. This was more fluid. This was more in flux. You're a former prosecutor. You issued a lot of subpoenas to people, and any thoughts on that argument?
It's going to be tough because the subpoena, he's not being sued over the documents after the subpoena or anything after. He's being sued about the subpoena.
Yeah.
So even if you didn't turn it in on, let's say, day X, and I gave you 10 more days, when I go, I'm like, well, the subpoena says he's supposed to turn it over at day X, and he did.
Yeah. Right.
So even now, could you make it could you say that they waived that time or something like that? But still, it's still, if the conclusion that this judge makes, if he says that's a lawful subpoena and it has a date on it, then that date is in stone, no matter kind of what, unless you have something technically in writing, like almost a plea agreement, like, okay, we're going to waive this, and very explicitly. But otherwise than that, it's a good argument to make.
Yeah.
But I think it's a hard argument to win without a little bit more facts.
Yeah, I agree. And we were talking about that and sort of the incentives it might create. Like if you allow somebody to attempt it and then sort of give them a deadline, and then they sort of like try to hit the deadline and then they don't, and then it just creates perverse incentives. It would cause more people to do that. It would cause more people to ignore subpoena deadlines. And, the courts, of course, don't want to do that. When you stopped by on Tuesday, you talked more about, I was sort of screaming from the rooftops about the committee being illegally constituted. and you said, easy, it's non-justiciable. And so you threw that in the chat, and it's sort of like, I was like, Nate, and it was a good point. But can you tell us sort of what you mean by that? Because it is a good point. Okay. And I think it's a good way to distinguish sort of the, how the committee is sort of, outside of the court process, because it's very confusing for people. Why can't Bannon get these subpoenas, and why can't he sort of demand all this stuff?
Well, there are two issues at play, and people need to first understand that both issues, I got four things, both issues can be correct. So issue number one, was the committee, was that formed correctly? Now, obviously, it wasn't, because the Republicans pulled out. It was supposed to be 5, and it was the shell issue. So I'm in 100% full agreement. The committee, as formed, was not formed correctly.
Yeah,
I'm there with that, against House rules. But now, what happened after that? Well, the House, as a government body, the House representatives, can delegate its authority to whoever it wants, right? Now, it has rules that say this is the way we're supposed to do it, but at the end of the day, it can delegate it to really who it wants. It can say, I don't care about those rules.
Right.
And how does it do that? Well, what you do is you have a full vote of the full House, and that full vote is a bill. And there's a bill, you can actually read it up on authorizing the January 6th committee that was voted on by the full. All Republicans voted against it, all Democrats, but there happened to be more Democrats than Republicans. So what that did was that delegated, even to this committee that didn't follow the rules, they delegated, the House of Representatives delegated authority to that committee as constituted, giving them legal authority to issue subpoenas on behalf of the House of Representatives. So that's what I mean by the committee has the legal authority to issue subpoenas. But you're right, where if it comes to whether it was constituted correctly, it was not by the House. Now, Bannon's argument is that, hey, I want to go to the court and challenge the fact that the committee wasn't created following the House rules. But that's what's known as non-justiciable,
right? In
terms of the courts cannot tell the House of Representatives how to run the House of Representatives. And in doing so, they would get into, like, it's essentially political question doctrine also.
Right.
But it's what's called non-justiciable, where the court says we can't tell the House of Representatives how to conduct their committees and who to delegate their authority to. Only did they have a vote? Yes. And they were giving it to these people. That's all the courts can do. So even though Bannon is right that the committee was not formed properly, it's just the courts do not have the constitutional authority to overrule the House giving this committee that authority.
Right.
I hope I explained that.
You did. You explained that. You explained that brilliantly. That was beautiful. Yeah, that was really, really good. Yeah, and it's it's also a separation of powers thing, right? You're not going to get the DC Circuit Judge, Judge Nichols, to go say, "Oh yeah, the January 6th committee is invalid," right? He doesn't have the authority to do that. I mean, he could, right? I guess he could, but
in certain situations. But in this situation, as long as like for instance, if he could say the committee is invalid if, let's say, the House didn't vote and a couple of people just got together and issued a subpoena.
Yeah,
they can say that committee they don't have any authority, right? But here, as soon as you have the full vote of the House and they say we're delegating it to this committee,
right?
There's nothing the judge can do.
Yeah, there's not much he can do about it. And so if you from your perspective, if this went up to the Supreme Court, are you saying that the Supreme Court couldn't find that the committee was invalid because they can set their own rules? How do you think that would play out? In other words, right? Under HR 503, where it says 13 members, 9 Democrats, 5 Republicans, right? That's the resolution that sort of creates that committee. So if that goes up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court is now saying, you've got 9 people, your rules say 13, would you sort of speculate that the Supreme Court would say, we'll just default to you, right? Run however you want to run yourselves.
Well, this something like this, similar to this, has actually been went up to the Supreme Court, but it happened in terms of impeachment. Judge Nixon, not President Nixon, his impeachment. And his impeachment, he argued that he didn't get a trial in the impeachment. He's like, I didn't get a trial. I didn't get a trial. I believe it was a trial. I believe he said, I didn't get a trial. And the process that the Senate used, the Senate said, okay, we're going to have a committee. The committee's going to look into it. Whatever the committee finds, then it goes to the full Senate, and the Senate votes on the impeachment, and they voted him out. So he was like, hold on. What are you talking about? It says there in the Constitution, I deserve a trial, right? Trial. So then the Senate was like, tell us, are you going to tell us how to run a trial? And the Supreme Court came down against Judge Nixon, saying that something like that, impeachment, the way it's even gone, that is totally up to the Senate. They make their own rules on how to do it. Only thing that Judge Nixon was guaranteed by the Constitution was the vote at the end. The vote for, but other than that vote, the way they did it, the way they came to that vote, they could have did dog racing for all.
Yeah.
That could have been his trial.
Yeah.
That is what it is. And that's the same process that we're talking about here to Constitution Committee. But now the Supreme Court could open it up and say, okay, well, if you have these rules and this, but then you still would have to avoid the whole thing of the full vote of the House, because the full vote of the House changing their own rules, because essentially that's what we were talking about. The full vote of the House essentially said this, even though this committee is not with the rules that we made to make committees, we're still authorizing.
Yeah.
That's something that's going to be hard to legally overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So I didn't know about that Nixon case. I'm going to have to look into that one. That sounds very interesting. And you could imagine that the Supreme Court would say it's your business, because now, right, what I think the founders really wanted to avoid was a situation where one branch of government has more power than another branch of government, right? They're supposed to be co-equal and have checks and balances. And so if you have the Supreme Court coming into the House of Representatives and saying, you guys are doing things wrong, then that's not really that equal, right? To some degree. So you sort of let these bodies conduct their internal affairs according to their internal affairs, and then they're able to run with the powers that they've got. And as long as they don't theoretically, exceed those powers, then the Supreme Court is going to defer to them and let them govern their bodies accordingly. Yeah.
Like even like, there are processes in place that's outlined in the Constitution, but outside of that, how we get there is all the purview of the legislative branch in terms of, the committees they set and all and so forth and so forth. But again, there's always exceptions to every rule, but generally that's just the way it is.
Yeah. That's a great take on it. Thank you for sort of explaining that, because my irritation with this whole saga has been the flat language in the law, right? It says HR 503, HR 503, and it says shall, and every show, you may have seen me on here. I said, I'm just going to do it again. We're just going to do it again. I'm going to explain this again and again and again. And it's because, right, from my perspective, I like to think about it in terms of legitimacy. And, we want a government that is legitimate and that actually does things for the people.
They follow their own rules.
Right. And the House of Representatives is a representative body that is supposed to be representative of the people. And when they conduct this committee, when they formed this committee, they wanted it to be representative, right? Mm-hmm. And, I think even maybe an argument, I'd be curious about what you think about this, but, if the House of Representatives voted on a bill like HR 503 in order to empower the committee, right, aren't they voting according to those rules? So they're voting to say, yeah, we'll allow a committee to be formed if it's got 13 Dems or 13 committee members, but an equal split, right? So 5 Republicans and 7 or I think 8 Democrats is what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, something like that.
So like if they're not, right, if the House voted on that, we'll take 13 members, but not 9, and they're not doing the 9, and now they're doing the 9 and not actually following the 13, it's like they're not following their own rules. And then when they come out and say that it is legitimate and that, this is a legally constituted body and it's got full of Republicans and it's bipartisan and, the media runs those headlines around and everybody says that Bannon's arguments against dismissals are all invalid, right? You just start to, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it is.
Of course, no, I want to be very clear. You are 110% right. That committee is wrongly you are not wrong about that. Anybody who says you're wrong about that doesn't know what they're talking about. You are right about that. And I agree. The next logical step is saying, well, then we can go to the courts and have them. But the reason why, because I had read the the thing. And the reason why was like, well, it's a non-justiciable act because they get to set their own rules. And since you literally had the full House saying, we're going to delegate to that, those rules essentially are meaningless at that point, right? Because if the House didn't want to give it to them, they could say, well, this is not violating, since it violates the rules, we're not going to do it. But they said we are going to do it. So it's kind of like, the cake was made, but even though it was made incorrectly.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and like we're saying, separation of powers. Do we allow the courts to go into there and say, well, we don't like the way you did that committee, so you should do it this way? Because again, you do then have that overflow of, if they're in charge of making laws, then how much can the court really go in there and tell them how to do what they do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think it's true. And this is why this stuff is complicated, and it's easy for both sides to sort of pick a headline and run with it, because it is convoluted, and it can be difficult to unpack. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. Now, I have one final Bannon question before I ask you some J6 stuff is, so Viva has been very certain that he gets convicted, right? And he's been pretty consistent on that. I had Joe on and Viva on, I think on Tuesday. And so we were all, what do we think about, acquittals or convictions? And we're all sort of, okay, yeah, probably acquittals. Did you see anything today that changed your mind, or any thoughts on that? Like any strengths from Bannon or any prognostications on where this thing goes?
I still think the jury thing may ravel things up, but it's on a paper, and what I keep using the word paper case. On a paper case, it's like a tax, like somebody's like taxes, right? Here's how much you made, here's how much you owe. It's all a formula. They're like 99.9% of the time you're going to jail if they come after you. And that's what this essentially is too. It's a paper case, even though, and what you do is you've seen arguments to attack the legitimacy of the paper, right? This paper is illegitimate, right? This subpoena is illegitimate. And then the illegitimacy of the people who wrote that piece of paper. But at the end of the day, if the jury believes that piece of paper is legitimate, then it's literally A, B, C. So that's why I do think he's going to get convicted. Yeah. Because, unless you can show his mental state, I'm thinking that's what those arguments are good for, because you want to give the jury something to think about. So I think the two things that you can hang your hat on if you're the jury today is, did he buy that second letter? Now that second letter can matter not for whether it was lawful or not, but it can matter on his state of mind, right? Hey, you told me that I could have some more time. Right. So I didn't intentionally do this, right? Which is, which now my mens rea is a different mens rea, right? I was complying. You said you could get more time, and I took more time. And now you're saying that, no, it was really only to this time. Did I intentionally deceive it? Now you don't have that. So I think the mens rea argument is a stronger argument. Hey, when you said I wrote this, I didn't even write that. Somebody else wrote that. And then why would I say I'm not going to comply? And I'm talking to them, explaining to them how exactly I am going to comply. Right. So, how can my mens rea be, I'm doing this willfully? I didn't comply with the subpoena willfully. And they told me I had more time. That's where I think the mens rea piece starts really. That's the way, again, and obviously I know you're going down that road, but that's where I would attack it. The mens rea, I think, is really vulnerable on the government side, but I'm not sure if they're going to, Bannon's lawyers are going to. Well, they didn't go too far.
So no evidence presented. They did. You were talking about the validity of the subpoena. They did have that argument. I wanted to ask about the idea that Ammerling was the one who actually wrote it. Benny Thompson just signed it, and they were saying that Ammerling, right, who is the House counsel for the White House or for the January 6th committee, they're saying she drafted it and she didn't have the authority to sign it or anything, and that basically Benny signed it, but since he didn't draft it, he didn't know the specifics, and so they're sort of trying to split hairs on that a little bit. And it's an argument.
Well, you know what? I'll say this, as a defense attorney, and this, you make the government jump. You do the jump through hoops. You make the government jump through every hoop. Yeah. So there are hoops the government got to jump through. And every single hoop it's your job as a defense attorney to make them jump through that hoop. Did you read for instance, an arrest? Did you read the Miranda rights? Did you do this? Did you do this? Right? You're asking the cop all those questions. All these questions, you got to make sure they did the procedure correctly. And I think that's what I think that's what they're attacking. But I just don't know how compelling it's going to be. Yeah. I don't know. It seems like it can go, but I would be more on the decline. I don't think it's going to be as successful as it sounds.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it feels like a lawyer might latch onto that, but I think a lot of jurors will just sort of not really consider that to be a big deal. They kind of understand the concept of a group, or like being a part of a committee or an organization where other people have a division of labor, you know? And so I don't think they expect Benny Thompson to be sitting here typing all of these subpoenas, even though maybe there's an argument that, you know, he should or whatever. I think people just sort of think that that is part of standard operation of business, and they're not going to hold it against the government for that.
Yeah, but I also think, if you know, because again, sometimes you're trying to, for those of you, when you do trial work, you're trying to also do a theme. Sloppy work. I'm not sure if they showed sloppy. This is sloppy work, right? This person signed this. Who the hell is this? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Because again, you want to try to get a theme. Like, you know, they were in a rush. They were doing this. So maybe pointing this out may not be the winner that you want, but in the aggregate, you start telling a story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So we also have the January 6th thing that's happening right now. I streamed the first, I think, 2 or 3 of them, and then it was just a little too painful for me to continue to do that, you know. And that's really kind of obviously an extension of this. And, you know, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. They're doing another hearing today. I think it's the 8th hearing. You know, any general thoughts on how that's going, or whether it's effective or not?
I think it's been a bomb, but I think, all right. So when it comes to January 6th, one thing I think is clear. We all disagree with what happened, right? Yeah. They shouldn't have done that. It was illegal. People who broke stuff and did that stuff should be arrested. Disclaimer, right? We all agree. We've said it here on the show. But the issue is in the political framing of this whole thing. And this political framing is that this was an insurrection. I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And I'll disagree with that for 2 reasons. Number one, this was, and I hate to use this analogy. The first thing I'm going to say is this was a failure in law enforcement, an outright failure. And if we did, it's less than Uvalde, but it's a pretty big F up in law enforcement. And if you see my breakdowns on it, I go through when you see the cameras walk up to the gate. And there's 5 officers with no riot gear who are looking, and you got 10,000 people in front of them. That's a failure. When the chief of the chief of the Capitol Police, the sergeant, everybody in charge of security apparatus resigned. It was such an abject failure.
Yeah,
they didn't have enough people. They were not prepared, and the fact that they knew they were coming.
Right?
How do we know they knew they were coming? Because the day before in the newspaper, they were telling people, we know they're coming and we're not worried about it. Security is going to be tight.
Right.
So if that's the case, now people may say, well, Nate, what about the violence? What about the violence? Again, we all hate the violence. We hate the violence. We are saying we're not against the violence. But if we're really that concerned about the violence, I would suggest you look up January 20th, 2017, and see what type of violence happened on that day. Now, that was another day in January where we were trying to transfer power. Do you want me? Well, do you have a matter of fact? Can I send you a link?
So yeah, please. And I'd love for you to give us a quick rundown on that, because we're here talking with Nate the Lawyer. He's on YouTube at Nate the Lawyer. He's all over the place on Twitter, and you can certainly connect with him. But he put a video out on this date, and so I will link that.
Yeah, I'm putting this in the internal chat for yes, here it is. So this is what happened on January 20th, 2017, 4 years before January 6th. And just so people know, how many people were arrested for the riots at the Capitol?
Just over, the total now is like just over 800. So
all right, so at this one, 200. So we're talking about 200 people.
I'm gonna pull you off the screen, Nate. Everybody can still hear you. I'm just pulling you off the screen so I can
all
just
right,
chat.
Cool.
Okay, so and I got the link up here. Okay, so let me throw you up on the screen now. There we are. This is not the best way for me to do all this, but I appreciate it. Okay, so we're back. I've got the link. Now I'm pulling that up here on the screen. Violent anti-Trump protests try to steal the spotlight on the inauguration day.
200 people are arrested.
Yeah.
Burning cars. You see them all. You see how everybody's in the same outfits and everything.
Yeah, and I never even.
You didn't hear about this.
No,
I
never
know.
even heard about it. There it is playing right.
You see
right in the
everybody's.
background.
You see, is that coordination?
Look
Do
at
these
that.
people mean to be there?
Look at that. Yeah. And that was the Trump inauguration.
That was with Trump.
Right?
That was Trump. 200 arrests. You heard nothing. Absolutely nothing about this, right?
Yep.
First time. It was that bad. You heard nothing about it. But why? We know why. Why. So this is what I'm talking about. When it comes to just reporting fairly, it just doesn't happen. So the Trump, and now the difference between what happened then and what happened now was that, as you can see, back in 2017, the police were prepared. They had perimeters. They had everything locked down. You saw riot police with riot gear before they even got there.
Yeah.
That's not what happened on January 6th. So the security failures, I think, are monstrous, right? It's really that, it's at that level. So then we come to just, obviously this became now political theater. I think they need to be honest with the American people and say, we messed up. We didn't have enough people. These guys messed up, and yes, whatever this election thing happened, but we messed up, and we need to be better. And we need to fix the security issues that we had here, because if we had the proper security here, like we did for the BLM rally 6 months earlier, when we had something like 700, 800 officers there, we wouldn't have had this problem.
Right.
That's the issue that happened here.
So I completely agree with that. I'm going to ask, and you don't, certainly don't have to go as far, but not only negligence, right? But not only sort of they just screwed up, but was there any willful dropping of security? Mayor Muriel Bowser on January 5th sort of said, we don't need any help. The Senate Sergeant at Arms, actually the Capitol Hill Chief of Police, his name is Stephen Sund. He asked both the House and the Senate Sergeant at Arms for more support, and they denied him that on the 4th, I think it was. And so it's like, was somebody denying those requests because they would have liked to see Donald Trump step in it, or they would have, wanted to encourage something like this to happen?
I don't know, man. I don't know. Because you know what? It's the failures are so. It's almost like, all right. I would have said, let me put you in my headspace. I would have said yes to that question if you asked me before Uvalde.
Okay. Because
Uvalde is such a F up that then this type of F up is like, okay, it can get even worse than that. But if this was before Uvalde, I would have said yeah, it's got to be. But if Uvalde showed me they can even be even dumber.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at now, because Uvalde's crazy. That's what I was like, they can't get no dumber than this. Then Uvalde happened. I was like, okay, they proved me wrong.
That's funny. So it's like don't attribute to malice where you can attribute to incompetence or whatever that saying is. And that's a funny point. It's true, right? Uvalde was one of the worst. I mean, how could something be so catastrophically bad if it were not intentional, right? It's one of those scary things to sort of think about. The Capitol building, the reason I was saying this about the Capitol building, it's supposed to be the most secure building in the whole world, right? We had our entire Congress there. Okay. The vice president was there. The entire Congress was there. And they couldn't deal with 1,000 protesters. 800 people got charged. They couldn't deal with 800 people. And I've talked about this many times, but many of those, violent offenses, one of the Proud Boys, or it's either the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, one of them was, their violence was throwing a water bottle at an officer, right? So, you really start to break this down. It's shocking to me that you could have the congressional building with all of the Congress people in it overrun by 1,000 people, 2,000 people. How can that be?
Unarmed and untrained and uncoordinated, right? It was less coordinated in 2017 when we wearing all the same stuff, right? It's a little less coordinated than that, but it was still, there were some coordinated things going on. Let me not go too crazy here.
Yeah.
But this is really just a whole group of people just walked up to the building, and that was it. And some were even being let in.
Yeah.
Some were even being let in. That's what I'm talking about. But the thing is that the truth, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And never let the truth get in the way of a good narrative.
Right.
Now, we could easily spin this narrative to what I believe is the truth, is that they could have came on and said, we had a security failure. Now, true is that Trump should have acted early and all that stuff could be true, but this was a security failure.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough cops here. None of them had riot gear on. By the time we got everybody in place, they were already at the, now the barbarians are at the gates. Now your backs are literally to the wall, because when the issue is when you don't have when you're doing security and especially building security, it comes in layers. So the first layer, you want to make it so when your officers, when the crowd comes and they're calling for backup, those officers now have to go get changed. Those officers aren't in riot gear. They got to go put their stuff on. So they got to go in, put their stuff, and then you got to call other people in. And you still got to keep them back. So by the time you get all that prepared, everybody's now right there at the door, inside the door, because that's the crowd now has had that time that took you to get ready to put your riot gear on. That's why if you look at a lot of the Capitol, the things that happen, you'll see the officers literally with their backs against the wall, because they just come outside and the crowd is right on you. Right. So your back is literally against the wall. And that's why you saw them all trapped in these little spots, because it was just too late. The crowd had gotten to them. But that was a failure in planning, because if you look back in 2017, the same buildings are in play. The people are coming to do this mass, we want to shake stuff up. But they were able to establish a perimeter, make sure nobody got close to anything that could be broken, and just kept them outside. But that's the way you would do it. And that's the way I would expect it to be done here. But again, you can't let it, I think it's sexier for Democrats to say this was an insurrection.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Than to acknowledge that this was one of the biggest security failures in the history of this country.
Yeah, and they are really, really milking it. They have their hearing today, and we're talking with Nate the lawyer, of course. So please go check out his channel. Normally on the other streaming platforms, you get your name down there, and I don't have your name down there. So I want to make sure I keep shouting you out. You're over at Nate the lawyer on YouTube. But all right, so we've got the J6 thing that's going on today, and the Bannon trial is wrapped up sort of tomorrow. Do you think that this is the end of this? I think today's supposed to be their last hearing, right? And
yeah, I think today was the end, right? Well, today they both closed, so they're going to do closing arguments, right?
Closing arguments will be tomorrow morning, but today was apparently the last J6 hearing, supposed like on schedule. And I guess my next question is, where do you think it goes from here? Do you think that ultimately they want to lead to a Trump indictment, or is this something where they get his deputies, or what's the end game of the J6 committee? Where do you think this thing sort of wraps up?
I think the Democrats have gotten a lot of losses, and I think they need a win. And I think that this is where let's try to get a win. Now, Biden was a great win. But I think they see the writing on the wall. If just so everyone understands too what's been happening in the electorate. If you go back maybe 5-6 years, it was predicted that Democrats would start growing in numbers, and we started seeing that, right? More Democrats in the electorate. And we assumed that people who were coming in from other countries would be more likely Democrats, right? Because the painting of the Republican Party was anti-immigrant, that type of thing. Not anti-illegal immigration, it was just anti-immigration. So, so it was a change, dropping that illegal immigration to just make it anti-immigration.
Right.
Kind of pitched it so the more people we can get in here, the more Democrats we'd assume they were.
Right.
And nowhere is that more evident on the southern border of Texas, where you have now illegal or undocumented immigrants coming across the border and then settling towns. So, so those Texas towns, you have a lot of people who have families on both sides of the border, right? A family here, a family there, right? They're American citizens because they were born here. Come to find out now, those towns on the border and a lot of those towns in southern Texas have flipped from blue to red. And that's happening even in Florida with a lot of their heavily Democratic counties. They're starting to flip red. So people are trying to figure out, why is that happening? And it's because the people who have come from those countries that are capitalist, socialist, that resonates more with them. Like, we're not going back to live with
Yeah.
Castro. We came here because we were running from them.
Yeah,
we're
they
not
know,
going
yeah.
back to Mexico. That's why we coming here.
Right.
That's
They know.
crazy.
Yeah.
They're voting for the person who says anti-socialism. They're voting for and a lot of and it's interesting because a lot of the policies too with the Democrats actually hurt those communities. The COVID policies, obviously, locking down for extreme amounts of time, because those are the people who couldn't really, if you work at, let's say, McDonald's or at food services, you can't work remote, right? There's no such thing as remote work. It's just not working.
Right.
So, if you have a lot of those people were really upset about, hey, there's a financial cost to this. We just can't stay home. That's for the rich liberals up in the Northeast.
Yep.
We can't do that. And that started to turn, and you're starting to see it in the electorate. So I think the Democrats need this, it's a fear tactic. I think they need this to try to just show that, hey, we did all we could. I don't think they believe they can get something out of Trump. I think Trump's exposure is maybe in Georgia, but there's no political incident. So what? They find that he's a bad guy. What are you going to do? Right?
Yeah. That was my sort of instinct on this. I understand that people do bad things and people need to be prosecuted for crimes and all of that, right? We have a DOJ, we have an executive branch, all of that. But there are certain categories of crimes that I think are better served to be dealt with in the political realm. And like, even if you debate whether it's a crime, right? All the Democrats say Donald Trump's a criminal, Bannon's a criminal, all of this stuff. All the Republicans say the opposite of this. And there is some legitimate room to disagree on this, right? The Senate right now is talking about passing the Electoral Count Act. They said that there were no problems with it the last go round, but then they're going to fix it because there were problems with it and because you actually can debate about some of these things. And we've even unpacked a lot of that here going through the Congressional Research Service documents that explain how convoluted a lot of these things are, right? So it's not as cut and dry about, how Pence can count the votes and all this stuff. There is a lot of, when we were talking about the election litigation, I was pretty questioning about some of the theories that were being proffered forward. But that doesn't mean that you can't proffer those theories. It doesn't mean you can't think about them and talk about them and investigate them. That doesn't make you a criminal, right?
No.
I mean, you're a lawyer, right? It's like if somebody asks you to think about all the potential options on how to win their case, and you lay out all the potential options on how to win their case, that doesn't make you a criminal because you're talking about things that might push the envelope a little bit, right?
Yeah. You weigh options. Here, option A, option B. You can't do this because of this. Make sure if you're in, you make sure you do it this, you follow these rules, because if you don't follow these rules, you can get in trouble.
Right.
But yeah, I think, I don't know. I think to the point, it's difficult when it comes to politics, because I always feel like I find myself questioning the motives of people. You know what I mean? And sometimes I hate doing that. I don't know. Maybe I'm going maybe I'm thinking too deep into it. But I always feel with politics, it's always like we got to get to what the person's motive is versus what the thing actually is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, my big question is whether they indict Trump, and ultimately I think that a lot of the people in the committee want that, right? A lot of the Democrats want that, but I'm not so sure that Merrick Garland, can sign off on that. And I don't know that, that would be beneficial for their side. I think the consequences of indicting, Trump, especially if he runs.
But what's the crime? What could be the crime? What could be the crime for you? For Trump is it's not like he's hiding. Oh, we're going to tell those people to come. Come to the Capitol. Come. Yes, come. He's screaming at everything. Come to the Capitol. Come. Then while he's there, we're going to go there and yell and scream, but do it peacefully. Right. And that's inciting the riot. Oh, because he said this. Oh, because he said that. This guy has a freedom of speech. He can say whatever he was saying it even after it, right? Like he still saying today, ask him today, that election was stolen. Straight up. If you believe otherwise, you don't know who I am.
Right.
So I think I think that's the, if I don't see how you charge, even with everything that I've heard. Like what do you think they would charge Trump? Like, what could they charge him with? What is it?
I think they're talking about, dereliction of duty or some sort of, abstract thing that that he should have acted. He should have done something, and he failed to. Like some sort of a negligent crime, or they obviously nobody's been charged with insurrection. They have tried to get the both. Unless I'm wrong about that, but the two groups have been charged with seditious conspiracy, and that's sort of the that's the big crime that they're saying that Trump was, I guess, orchestrating with his speech. So maybe seditious conspiracy.
Well, maybe I have to ask you this though: could Trump? All right, generally, I'm assuming Trump has sovereign immunity against any claims from January 6th, right? Because, and what I mean by that, as president, he can't be charged with any crime, right? He has immunity from prosecution while he's president and the acts that he commits as president. And he has like full diplomatic immunity wherever he goes. So for those of you who know, heads of state generally have sovereign immunity. So that's why in the Mueller investigation, Mueller couldn't charge Trump with any crime as of right now because he was president at the time. So generally, you can't charge people. You can't charge the current president with a crime at that time. You have to wait till after he's president. And also, you can't charge the president with crimes while he's in office. I mean, for things that he did while he's in office. So here, even if there was something that he did in office, if he was still president at the time, it would be hard for me to see. He could easily raise the claim that acts while I was president.
Yeah,
I can't be charged with.
Yeah, I think it would be very messy, and I'm not sure that Garland, like I said, has it in him. I think that I think he's at the current moment kind of encouraging the people on his side of the aisle. We're investigating this. We're really looking into this, and we're going to come to a conclusion at the end of our investigation. But I really think it's going to be a hard thing for them to do, to indict him, especially if he's already running, because then it makes it look like if he announces, right, and then they indict him, it sort of makes it political. And doesn't that kind of energize people? Some people may have been kind of forgetting about Trump, or maybe thought that this was sort of like J6 was kind of like an unforgivable sin or something. But then, right, then they see him become the victim of this onslaught from this political group who's now sort of charging him under these crimes. I personally think that might motivate a ton of people to get agitated, get involved, not anything violent, but, donate and go out and protest and support him in a way like that gives him an advantage that other candidates don't have, right? Like a Ron DeSantis or something, right? Doesn't have those strong headwinds, and Trump is that person. He's that fighter. So, I honestly, I think if they indicted him, it might just set him up to win the election. I don't know.
You know what? It'll be crazy though. Let's say if they indict him and he runs for president while indicted and gets convicted. He can still run for president while he gets convicted, right? And then wins the presidency.
Right.
That'd be like a weird little thing. Like,
I
okay,
know.
this guy actually won the presidency. But no, I don't think they'll indict him. I don't think. Well, two things. I don't think there's anything to indict him for. But I think because he's got a great free speech argument. I just don't see him doing any crimes. I think they're trying to. This is they're trying to get Trump for being Trump. But I just don't see it. I honestly don't see it. And I'm not a Trump. I do not love Trump at all.
Yeah.
But what's fair is fair. If there's no crime here, there's just no crime. It just is what it is.
So you think then the only real end game of the committee is just to sort of tarnish him, to kind of damage his reputation?
Benghazi.
Yeah.
Benghazi, right? There's a select committee on Benghazi.
Right.
We knew what happened, how it happened, who died, what died, everything, right? We knew everything that happened in Benghazi. And they had that select committee on until Obama's last day. They select committee was going on forever because it's political.
Yeah.
And that's that same thing with the January 6th one. We're going to do it forever. There's January 6th until eventually we move on from January 6th. And they're looking for the next January 6th.
Yeah. And do you think that if the balance of power changes in 2022, right, in these upcoming elections, like if the Republicans take over the House, right, which they're sort of expected to do, does the committee evaporate after that, or do they?
Yeah, the only thing you need is another act, right? The just like the House can grant them that subpoena power and that power to do that stuff. One of the first votes is we're going to take that power back from that committee. That committee no longer has that power to do that.
Yeah,
that's exactly what they're going to do. They can meet never, but they just don't have any authority from us to do anything. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and I was wondering if the Republicans, right, the Republicans are in charge now, maybe they want to start looking at Hunter Biden, or they want to start looking at Afghanistan, or they want to start looking at the border, or any one of these things. And
the Democrats just shot themselves in the foot because they made it a lot easier. Well, you really don't need 13 members on the committee. Remember what just happened?
I know. You just get Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they just say, "Hey, we're just going to form our own committee, idiots." And they, we don't need anybody on there, just us two, and we're going to go investigate everybody because the rules don't matter.
The select committee.
Yeah, the Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene select committee with Lauren Boebert, and they just go after all the Democrats. Like, it's. I hate to see it, honestly. Like, I hate to see the United States weaponizing its political system for criminal law. I think the political system, Trump can face his comeuppance. If people are unhappy with him for what happened on J6 and he runs again, the people can register their disdain at the ballot box. You're exactly right. Yeah. But to sort of weaponize Congress and to weaponize these committee hearings to go after their political opponents, in my opinion, it's something that's way worse than anything that took place on January 6th. And I think it sets a really dangerous precedent.
Yeah, I think. I don't know. January 6th, because I'm a Leo guy, so I feel bad for those cops that had to take the brunt of that. But again, I think that's more incompetence than anything of their higher ups. Like, those cops went through that because the people above them didn't prepare.
Screwed up.
Yeah, they didn't prepare everything correctly. But I still think that that's still horrible. Don't get me wrong. You kind of expect the Democrats to do what the Democrats are going to do, right?
Right.
And I'm assuming they saw this and they said, "This is where we're going to go with this." It's food for thought, food for fodder.
Yeah, it's good stuff, Nate. I really appreciate you coming by. What else are you working on? What's going on your channel?
So right now I'm doing I'm reading the Jose Alba case. Do you know Jose Alba?
No, what's that one?
That was a bodega worker who stabbed the guy.
Oh. Yeah. So what's going on with that one? So I have not followed that one. I've been doing J6 stuff and then Bannon, but that was that one really caught my eye, and I don't know what's going on with that. What's the update?
So the district attorney just dropped the charges. In New York, you can here in New York for self-defense, like in I think most states, I think all states, but I know somebody said there was a quirk. But in most states, and I'm going to say most because I'm not sure if it's all, but I'm thinking all, but most states, if the defendant raises a claim of self-defense, it's the prosecutor who has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that you did not act in self-defense. And that's the same here in New York, where the prosecutor has to prove that this guy, Jose Alba, did not act in lawful self-defense. Now, the case was somebody comes in, a woman and child come in. They give the guy his card, he swipes the card doesn't work. He gives her back the card and says, "Hey, your card doesn't work." The daughter puts the chips back on the counter. The guy grabs them, the chips off the counter, and then the mother goes crazy. "Oh, you touched my daughter's hand." He's like, "Yo, I just grabbed the chips." You see him on camera. She goes freaking out. She starts throwing everything on the floor, knocking things down. Then she says, "I'm going to get my boyfriend to come and F you up." She then walks out, comes back. Boyfriend comes a couple of minutes later. He goes around the back, starts roughing the guy up. Guy pulls out a knife. The store clerk pulls out a knife, stabs the guy to death. The guy tries to move the store clerk out from behind the thing, so the store clerk stabs him to death. It's clear self-defense.
Yeah.
Clear self-defense. It was, if you watch the video, it's just clear self-defense. What the hell is he doing back there? He's 35 years old, 6'1". He's 61 years old, 5'7". So it's just like it's all about around. But the DA decided to, because self-defense is a little something you got to prove. He charged the guy.
Yeah.
He charged the guy and asked for $500,000 bail. They knocked it down to They knocked it down to $250,000. But then after the tapes came out, even the mayor and everybody said that it was obvious self-defense and that type of thing. So it was a very interesting case where it was essentially like Rittenhouse again, where it was a clear self-defense, but for political motivations, the district attorney wasn't going to let it go. So I'm going over their motion to dismiss. It was a fabulous motion. I'll send it to you too, where the DA really makes a very, very good argument why this is self-defense. But the other issue is that the DA's argument essentially says that the perpetrator, the guy who came in and roughed the clerk, committed a burglary, entering the purpose of committing a crime, burglary.
Okay.
Now, some states have a breaking and entering requirement, but in New York, it's if you enter into a building with the intent to commit a crime, you're committing a burglary. So here, he entered into that property with the intent to commit a crime, and then committed a trespass by going behind the counter and assaulting the guy. So they're saying that he was in the commission of a burglary. So that also means his girlfriend, who came back with him, and they both were armed at the time too. Just to be clear, they both
really?
were armed with knives. Yeah, but the clerk didn't know that. So one had a knife in her purse, and he had a pocket, what's it called, a box cutter in his pocket. So when so eventually when they were fighting, when the clerk was stabbing him, trying to get away, she stabbed the clerk. So now people are saying, why didn't she charge? Because the district attorney didn't charge her with anything.
Wow.
So they were saying, well, why wasn't she charged? And why didn't she charge with felony murder? Because they went there to beat the guy up, and a DA says it's a burglary. Well, then he died in the commission of that felony, then she should be charged with felony murder.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting case. Yeah. Thank you for that. I didn't know that. So I did see the video, like when it happened, whenever that was a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, oh, obvious self-defense, right? This is kind of elderly guy who's sitting in the chair, and he's almost being attacked. But that's curious that so was the motion to dismiss from the defense, or was that from the prosecutor? Like, did the prosecutor realize they screwed up and then dismiss it, or was this a defense initiated motion?
Well, the prosecutor realized that they made a mistake,
okay,
and now now wrote this dismissal. But the dismissal is when you read it, you'll see it's like, this is all obvious. It's all obvious. But
okay,
it gives you a real good take on New York law. But again, if you want to see like what a self-defense case would look like, they really lay it out. So.
Awesome.
And it should have been dismissed. So that's what I'm headed to next. And then some more Uvalde stuff. I'm going to do some more Uvalde stuff.
Good. Yeah, good. That's the other one that I haven't really been able to cover all that much. I think I did a short on it or two, but that story is just horrific. You have kids, right? I mean, you have I was listening to you on Viva earlier, and I think your daughter, had an accident or something. She all right?
Oh no, that was Viva's kid.
Viva's kid.
Yeah. No, but mine's all right. She's
good. All right. I was listening in the background, so I must have gotten that one confused. But awesome. Okay, so Nate, where do people find you? How do they connect with you? People in the chat over on our locals and elsewhere, they're saying, man, they love you. I pinned your if you're in the live chat, there's a pinned comment that directs you right over to Nate's channel. But Nate, why don't you just sort of tell people what the best way to connect is with you, and when do you stream and stuff like that, or do you have a schedule?
Oh yeah. My name is Nate the Lawyer. I generally stream once or twice a week, Mondays, and I try Thursdays. I try Wednesdays and Thursdays. Today, I wasn't able to get a stream in the past couple of days. And I generally do produce videos. So if you like the law and you like things explained out without really a lot of the spending bias, come check me out. But you're going to disagree with me. You're going to disagree. Understand? You're going to disagree with me. If you agree with everything that I say, then something is wrong.
Yeah.
You're going to have a disagreement.
That's the best kind of conversations to have, right? And the best type of stuff to listen to, because if you're only listening to stuff you agree with, I think you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. You want to challenge yourself and push yourself. So I'm glad that you're doing that.
Well, listen, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it, brother.
No, it's my pleasure, honestly. And it feels like it's taken way too long for us to sync up, but I'm really glad that we did. And I hope to do more with, more of it, because I learned a lot. I know, the audience really loved it. And so, please go follow at Nate the Lawyer on his channel. Nate, thanks so much, my friend. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
All right, my friend. So that was Nate the Lawyer, and what a great conversation, huh? I mean, he's awesome. So he's over on YouTube, and I linked the channel link, his channel link, so you can go subscribe to him. But he does great work, and I'm really grateful. So thank you, Nate, for swinging by. Chat says, thanks, Nate. Yeah, great conversation. Love that. We should do more of that, shouldn't we? All right. So Nate the Lawyer. Now, as I mentioned, we are not going to be covering the J6 stuff, but we do have a little bit of business left to attend to with Bannon, because remember, this was where we sort of we left off on, was at a recess, and Nate jumped in, which is perfect timing, and we got to hash out some of the issues, but the trial was not over, right? The trial's not over. We still got a little bit of a Twitter thread left. When we left, they were just taking a recess. They were just there until 1 p.m., but now they're back. Sarah Lynch says, all right, they had lunch, but now they're back here. It's 1 p.m. And so the court tells us that the judge is conferring with the defense and with the prosecutor over some of the jury instructions. And now the defense is making an argument saying, we can't have a fair trial unless we get access to Benny Thompson. Remember Benny Thompson? And they're back on the record now. And so David Schoen comes out for Steve Bannon. He's the defense lawyer. He says, all right, judge, listen, As the court knows, okay, our view is we have been badly stymied, which is an outstanding word. That's the word of the day, stymied, in being able to present a defense. We can't even subpoena our witnesses. So how can we present any evidence, Judge? And this case should be dismissed as a result. The judge says, well, look, I made the rulings that I made because I am bound by the DC Circuit precedent. And he says, I don't even think it's right. What? This judge doesn't even agree with the precedent that has been established in the DC Circuit, right? He says that the DC Circuit, I don't even think it's right at all, but I have to follow the precedent. Those are the rules that exist in our court. As per usual, in the trial, Nichols seemingly is losing patience with Schoen. The judge is saying, all right, here, David, you're irritating me a little bit. And as Schoen recites a history, Nichols interjects. The judge tells David Schoen, the defense lawyer for Bannon, he says, David, I know all of this, okay? I'm the judge. You're just a dumb defense lawyer. I'm smarter than you. I'm in the federal court system. You're just a lowly little loser over there. I know all of this, he says. So Schoen says, a committee staffer, he says, somebody who just works for the committee, a simple staffer, is neither competent nor the appropriate person to testify. He's talking about Kristen Ammerling. He's saying that Ammerling should not be somebody who is authorized to draft the subpoena. She's not on the committee at all. And says, in particular, because of that, we need to hear from Benny Thompson. Ammerling can't come out here and tell us anything because she's not legally constituted. The judge says, all right, David, you're bothering me. Why does Chairman Thompson matter? Why does he even matter at all? Benny, specifically, who's got COVID. If 8 members of the committee say, we don't want you to do this, why is a single member in a multi-member body important? Why are you singling out on Bannon? And yesterday, remember, we sort of pulled those guitar strings way out. We would like to sort of really pull those out and drag those out and see whether or not they move the variables or change the analysis. So the judge asks him, and Schoen says, well, why did the committee get Bannon another date, which is October 18th? And the judge says, look, I don't want to get into any of that. What element or issue in the case does any of this go to? So what the judge is doing is he's saying, look, Mr. Schoen, you are a little bit off on your analysis. You have to bring this back to the elements of the case. And also, I don't need a history lesson. And he says to David, he says, do you concede that what was in Mr. Bannon's head at the time was only reflected in the letters from the committee? And Schoen says, if Chairman Thompson thought that Mr. Bannon already had defaulted on the subpoena, then what would make him think he has the right to demand continued compliance, right? This is sort of in the weeds here a little bit. But if there was a breach, right? If the letter from Benny on the 8th really was a breach and it said you are in violation, why did he demand continued compliance? Why did he say you can continue to comply? Schoen asks, he says, why didn't he use the term default? Why didn't he use the term, you're in a default breach? And so what Schoen says is, Judge, because of that, because of all of these lines of questioning that we have, we need to examine a committee member. The only way we can get answers to these questions is if we drag somebody in here from the committee and talk to them. So Schoen says that we need to ask Benny Thompson if he knew that Bannon was acting on advice of counsel. Like, we got to know that because Benny Thompson is saying that he is in violation of the committee, right? He is the person who is the chairperson of it. He's kind of the head person on this thing. And he, presumably has a budget, and he hired this Kristen Ammerling. And so if there is an actual breach, we got to make sure that it's a breach of the right kind, right? It's a legitimate breach that happens on that day. It is an actual breach. It's not a fluid date that is in flux. So Schoen wants to call committee witnesses, and he wants to ask them if they weighed the alternative options to obtaining Bannon. Schoen says this is a purely political, partisan attempt to get Bannon. He says Raskin and Schiff, they wrote books on January 6th, and they have an interest in making sure the committee's findings are in line with their books because they're selling books. And the defense says, we want to examine the members. We want to know how and why those decisions were made. He's asking about the current sitting president. He says, does the current sitting president take precedent in invoking a privilege over a former one? Like, can Biden revoke or undo executive privilege for a prior administration? This is referring to how Biden waived it once he got into office. He said, look, you can get all the records from the prior administration because I don't care. So now Amanda Vaughn is up now, or the other prosecutor. Schoen tried to butter up the judge with compliments. That doesn't usually work. The judges are pretty keen on that. So I don't know why he was doing that, but he's like, Judge, look, regardless of your rulings, you're just an awesome guy. I know you denied every single one of our motions and you really kind of screwed us here, but you did it just really well. And I just want to compliment you on the tremendous job you've done here today. Vaughn stands up. She's the prosecutor, and she says, they have no non-speculative basis to think any member of the committee has any exculpatory information, right? So this is arguing that the defense, Bannon and the defense, they don't have any facts to proffer forward that might justify this line of questioning. They don't have any non-speculative basis to ask these questions or to get this information. They've got it. You got to have some inkling or some evidence, something to proffer forward in order to get it. Here, Vaughn says there is no evidence at all the defendant had anything in his mind that was not in the letters. And she adds that they have nothing to suggest additional committee witnesses would have any information. So the judge is bringing this up. The judge says the problem here with calling the members of the Congress is that there are legal issues. We've got separation of powers. We just talked about that with Nate. And therefore, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, we can't really even compel them to do any of this. And Vaughn says Bannon also doesn't have a reasonable basis to think any of the committee members would be exculpatory to him. Judge is reserving judgment on the motion to dismiss, as well as any concerns the defense has about access to witnesses. So they start going through jury instructions now. We're getting closer here. And you look at this. Sarah Lynch, she says, oh gosh, another recess. She says, oi, so many recesses. Can we just get through this? The defense wants the judge to instruct the jury that it can consider Bannon and his thoughts about the dates of the subpoena, saying that they were flexible. The government objects. Amanda Vaughn, she's like, absolutely not. You can't put an instruction in there that says Bannon thought the dates were flexible. That would be like an immediate not guilty, right? So the prosecutor's like, no, there was not even any evidence that was suggested to show that, so they can't say that, right? The judge is probably going to say that's true. So then we get back in court after the session, after the recess, and Sarah Lynch on Twitter, of course, is reporting here. She says that the defense attorney for Bannon, Corcoran, asks the right question. He asks, what are we going to accomplish today, Judge? Nichols says, if we get to closings, and the media room goes, oh, gosh. Closings? Closings would take 30 minutes for the government, a rebuttal 15. Defense predicts similar lengths. 30 minutes? My goodness, this thing's going to be done tomorrow by like noon. Vaughn complains the jury has been sitting here all day, so let's just do it, Judge. Like, the jury has not even been in this courtroom all day. Nichols is worried about these other items, though, right? Motions to quash. This judge is concerned that this case is coming back down on appeal. He knows that. So he's trying to cross all the T's, dot all the I's. Nichols is worried about other items, including a ruling on his motions and the finalizing of the jury instructions. He says this is going to take some time. Nichols tells the court, he says, we're either going to all of the instructions and closings today or all of that tomorrow. We're going to squeeze it in or we're going to hold it off to tomorrow. Depends on how long it takes to complete the instructions. He says, I'm the holdup at this point. The judge is saying, it's all on me. I've got to get these instructions situated, then we can call it a day. So Schoen, Bannon's defense lawyer, he says, all right, Judge, I got to talk to you about Bannon's right to testify. He says, look, Bannon wanted to do so since the day that he was indicted. Okay, he wants to come out here and tell his side of the story. But he tells us, on the advice of counsel, he has decided not to testify because he understands he would be barred from telling the true facts. If Bannon gets up there, the judge in these motions, in these motions in limine, a lot of these preliminary motions, this is outside the scope of what he is allowed to discuss. The judge said, Bannon, you can't talk about this. You can't talk about that. You can't talk about that either. So Bannon's saying, what's the point of me testifying if I can't talk about that? Why would I get up there if I can't say Benny Thompson is whatever, right? So he's saying, Judge, on advice of counsel, he's not going to take the stand. And I've speculated for some time this is because of the appeal. They want to appeal this, and they don't want to have presented evidence, because if they do present evidence, then the court might take a look at that and just say, well, your evidence is crap and you're going to lose anyways. And they might try to come up with a fake because as to why they should deny their appeal. So now, right, they're just not going to do that because Bannon wouldn't be able to present the actual case they want to present. Schoen says Bannon will not testify because he is barred from using an advice of counsel defense. He can't say, I was relying on my lawyer. He can't say, I was relying on the Department of Justice. I was reading the prosecutor's own memoranda before I made a decision. He can't use those defenses, so why testify? He can't use the advice of his lawyer. He can't say that he even used executive privilege. For this reason alone, he's not calling Attorney Costello as a witness, right? They can't talk about any of those things, so why call his lawyer? They're going to recess for the day now, which means we're about to get to your questions and your comments and your super chats. They're going to recess for the day, and they're going to allow the jury to go home. Judge is going to review the instructions and the pending motion to dismiss. The government warns there's a January 6th committee hearing tonight, and this is probably what it looks like. Let's see what they've got here. The government is warning, saying, Judge, oh, here it is. Let's see who this is. Let's just check it. Let's see what they've got here. What are they playing here? Do I have this muted? I do have it. Okay, here it is. Oh, is it a clip? It's a video clip. They have a sign language interpreter now. They added that in, I think. That wasn't here before. So their video editor had some additional work to do. They added in a sign language interpreter. But their video editor is screwing this up because they cut off some of the they're cutting off some of the transcripts there. All right, so it's a video clip season. It's like one of those highlight reels or whatever. They've been doing this a long time. Oh, Mrs. Luria is here. Let's listen to her.
National Security Council staff was listening to these developments and tracking them in real time.
Is she reading?
On the screen, you can see excerpts from the chat log.
All right, yeah, so she's just reading, and
among the national.
These things are the most boring, most painful things of all time. But let's wrap up with Miss Lynch. She says, all right, government warns there is a January 6th committee hearing tonight, and they fear the jury might see it. They're going to go watch this stuff. The government also wants the defense to rest in the jury's presence, okay? They want the jury to see that the defense is not calling anybody so that they look like losers. They will bring the jury back to explain the next steps before dismissing them for the day. Now, Sarah here has some commentary, which I appreciate. She says, look, honestly, the constant delays in this trial and all the sitting around may motivate the jurors to deliver a swift verdict. Overheard one juror earlier today tell another he hopes he won't be back next week. Irritated over this case, just wants to issue a verdict. What verdict is it going to be? I think you know. The jury is back. They bring them in front of the courtroom, and the defense says, Judge, the defense rests. So the jurors are like, what? What are you talking? You're not going to present any evidence? This is weird. All right. We get to go home, though, right? Yes, you do. Perfect. Okay. One female juror was excused due to a medical issue, and the judge reminds them not to talk to others about this case. Don't watch TV about related matters. January 6th. They're doing a hearing in the middle of Steve Bannon's trial in Washington, D.C. for a bunch of Washington, D.C. jurors. And the judge says, don't pay attention to other related matters because, it might impact your decision making. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. start time. They started later today due to a scheduling issue. Tomorrow, the judge is going to finalize jury instructions, and he's going to communicate the plan on the motions argued earlier, and now they are in recess. And so, my goodness, my friends, that is the day. That is Bannon trial day 3, and it is kind of a lot of heavy lifting, right? Not a lot of really interesting developments, but a lot of arguments about motions and about judgments of acquittal and so on and so forth. And the judge is going to listen to all of those tomorrow, and we will, of course, unpack it. We might get a verdict tomorrow. We'll have to see. But now is the time to hear from you, my friends. And so over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, we've got our amazing community chatting away. Zach Nichols, Jeff Rook is over there. Phantasmagloria. Vienticus Prime says he's back to vacation mode. He just did a drive-by. He drove by the show. Here's what he said. Look at this. Vienticus just did a drive-by on our locals community. Drive-by weed and back to vacation mode. That's all he said. He just popped in and said, wee, and then drive-by weed. That's all it was. That's what goes on over there, which is why you should join. Let's take a look at some of the questions here. John McGarvey says, Rob, I'm afraid we will never see justice in D.C. There has to be a way to select a jury anywhere else. I think the right way to do it would just be to disband the D.C. Circuit Court. Just get rid of it. Never happened, but that would be the best way to do it. Sergeant Bob is here. He says, knowing you and the R&R law gives me confidence that R&R is a great choice for those that require help. However, my admiration does not reach the level to where I want to get arrested to prove the point. That's good, Sergeant Bob. We are good at our work, but I don't want to represent you. I don't want to represent you. Don't get in trouble. Sergeant Bob's a sergeant, so he was probably sending a lot of people to law firms like ours back when he was a law enforcement official called a sergeant. Shout out to Sergeant Bob and Miss Lucky. Zach Nichols says, off topic, can we take a moment of silence for a great man, a husband, a father, World War II veteran who left us today, J.C. the Music Man's grandfather. J.C. the Music Man. Rest in peace to your grandfather, World War II veteran. Man, the greatest generation. He will be missed. But he has earned his reward. Rest in peace there, J.C. the Music Man's grandfather. Thank you for sharing that with us, Zach. Thunder7 says, if the subpoena don't fit, you got to acquit. I love it. And another one here from Jeff Rook says, sorry if this doesn't relate to the topics of the day, but I woke up with a thought after yesterday's stream. He says, I think I've grown into a different definition of dictatorship than mostly from dealing with private contracts in my industry. I don't care how many people are in charge, be it a Congress, Parliament, Emperor, dictatorship. When one entity dictates the term of an agreement to the other party, it doesn't matter. Where we once understood the social contract as an agreement of necessity between the populace and the state, now that contract is one-sided. The state dictates the terms. Preach, my friend. And the populace has no meaningful way to influence the terms of the agreement, more so on a federal level, but political power is entrenched across the board. Relating to ignorance of the law, I would be happy with a social contract that reads, Party 1 forgoes their right to argue ignorance of the law, provided Party 2 ensures no undue burden is placed on Party 1 in the process of their seeking to comply with said law. I think what you're talking about here, Jeff Rook, is kind of a non-aggression principle concept of the law. Like if the law is not actually burdening somebody else, right? Like if it's a speeding ticket law and you're speeding through an empty road and some cop is sitting there, he's like, you're going too fast. And you go, what? It's kind of a non-harmful crime, right? It's one of these things that's like, it's not harming anybody. It's not damaging society. Now you can make the argument that speeding is, right? Or whatever, but you get the point. So people saying that you should really only criminalize laws that are, murder or like interfering with property and stuff like that. But drug crimes, if somebody wants to go smoke drugs, it's their problem. Let them smoke drugs, right? That's on them to figure that out. And so you just don't criminalize that. So you actually wouldn't have all the laws and you wouldn't have as many laws, which means you wouldn't have as many people ignorant of all of those laws. And you would have less opportunity to use ignorance of the law because the laws would be a lot more simplified and simplistic. Great comment there, Jeff Rook. Deep thought on that. Sergeant Bob says, holy crap, baby farms? I thought I had heard and seen it all. That was my feeling about that too, Sergeant Bob. That was from Nate the lawyer. Nate the lawyer told us, he's like, yeah, I was prosecuting baby farms. Like they would just grow babies in Nigeria and ship them over to the United States. What? And he's prosecuting crimes. Like, okay. I've seen a lot of things too, Sergeant Bob, but I've never heard of that one. I've heard of things like that about people sort of, they call it birth tourism. Right? They call it birth tourism, or anchor babies is the more pejorative term if you want to use that term. But they call it birth tourism. And, many people from affluent countries, many affluent, individuals will come here when they're pregnant, birth their child on the United States soil, and then leave. And that baby has United States citizenship because of our, of our birthright citizenship clause. And I wrote 30 pages about this in law school, about how the birthright citizenship clause, I think, is being interpreted inappropriately, and it doesn't make any sense. Here, this one came out from Zach Nichols. He says, scrolling around MSNBC and CNN YouTube, I'm beginning to think that many of their viewers believe Bannon is on trial for crimes committed on J6. We need to go back to the basics from Schoolhouse Rock. I'm not going to play that because I'll get a YouTube strike or a YouTube copyright thing, but certainly go check that out. Yeah, and it is fun. I'm just a Bill, something, right? Something, I'm just a Bill. Yeah, I remember him. Thunder7 says, well, let me finish this comment here. Yeah, Bannon is charged with a process crime, but they're making it seem like he's charged with a J6 crime. It's not true at all. Nate called it a paper crime, right? Same thing. Thunder7 says, Rob, I remember watching David Schoen during the number 2 Trump impeachment. I love his passion. Do you think that's a plus or a minus defending clients? Plus. I think it's a plus. Passion, I think, is a plus. He held back tears during the trial, and the fake news mocked him and asked him why he was so emotional. But I could tell he really cared about defending Trump and getting justice, and he's exactly the kind of lawyer I would hire if I ever had a criminal trial. Do you have an opinion on his style? And it's okay if you think he gets too involved, but I love his zeal. No, Thunder7. Do you know who you're talking to here? I mean, I'm kind of ridiculous on this show, right? I mean, I spin myself out the friggin' window on this channel. So no, I don't think that he's over the top or he's overly emotional or any of that stuff. I mean, you know, I get somewhat emotional here. I'm very passionate about it. And I started a whole channel here to be aggressive about it. I don't think what he's doing is inappropriate at all. And to be honest, I think that you're going to see a lot more of this. There's a great book actually right here. It's called Your Stand is Your Brand, my friends. Okay. If you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, this is by Patrick and Tempo. You know, I don't get anything from a recommendation of it, but he talks about a philosophical underpinning on how you incorporate your stand into your brand, right? Stop marketing yourself as like, you know, we make the best widgets. Rather, you say our widgets solve world hunger, right? It's a different approach. And I think lawyers, right, have to be passionate and they have to be strong advocates. You know, you've got to get out there. If you're just going through the motions, right, the jurors can feel that. The jurors want to feel somebody who cares about their clients. And I really think it's important. I'm a big fan of lawyers who are active and involved. And I think that lawyers who are just sort of, you know, going through the motions are less effective. Jeff Rook says, guessing Nate won't be here for the questions. Yeah, I probably botched that one up a little bit, but it says, while it may not make it justiciable, could Bannon's belief the committee is unconstitutionally formed be used as an element in his defense? I mean, yes, right. It could be if he could talk about it, but he can't talk about it. So he can't communicate to the jurors that he thought it was illegally constituted because the government has made the case and the judge bought it, that, you know, their communication to him was enough. Their response to him saying that excuse is invalid was enough to take that off the board. The committee said, Bannon said, you're unconstitutional. The committee said, no, we're not. So the court said, they said, no, they're not. And I have to defer to them because of separation of powers. Therefore, you can't talk about that defense. It's a great defense. I'd love for him to argue it, but he can't. Ed J says, why does no one else disagree with the decision that Bannon cannot use the following of his attorney's advice as a valid defense? If you can't listen to your attorney and follow recommendations, why do we pay them a fortune to represent us? It's a good question. First thing the judge did to Peter Navarro, he wanted him to get a lawyer. You thought that as well, Robert. Why? Can't trust them as far as you can throw them and you get a big bill anyway. No defense for Bannon. They won't help Navarro either. That's what's criminal. Maybe the Dems are right about getting rid of SCOTUS. Let's defund the courts. Let's just get rid of laws, period. They're only enforced if it's politically advantageous to the judge. The J6 people have been denied due process for 2 years. The whole legal system is subverted and politicized. Who needs it? It's not there for most of us. Yeah, you know, you're not wrong on this, Ed J. Okay, look, and I'm not saying that all the court systems should be invalidated, but what you're talking about here is people losing faith in the institutions, believing that they are no longer legitimate and that they lack credibility. And when that happens on a broader scale, right, we're like on I don't know, day 100 of this or like month 18. But it goes on and on and on. And the more that these committees create themselves and the more they are hyper-partisan political hacks, the more people are not going to trust them and to believe that they are illegitimate. And when that happens, people just stop connecting with the system. And the system won't work if people aren't plugged into it. You're seeing it out of the New York schools, right? The parents are pulling their kids out of these disgusting schools, and the schools are losing their cattle. And if they don't have any cattle, then they can't demand budgets, and they all start to lose and crumble. And that's happening as a big part of this, right? If people stop interfacing with the criminal justice system, if people stop believing that the laws have any enforceability, there may not be enforceability, because now, right, the balance, there's too many people. If enough people sort of, we're just not going to pay taxes anymore or whatever, what are they going to do about it? Jeff Rook says, funny to see a prosecutor and a defense lawyer discuss charges against Trump. Reminds me of work. I'm an operations rep at my job, and I manage jobs that salespeople sell. So I have to make sure it's up to snuff. My joke is sales. What could go wrong? Ops. What could go wrong is what he's saying. That's a funny perspective. We have that balance at our law firm, right? We have to make sure that we're not over-promising. We have to make sure expectations are being set. And it's easy for sales to go out, oh yeah. How many people did you murder? Oh, we'll get them all dismissed. Don't worry about it. If it's under 6 murders, we're going to get not guilties on all of them. Oh, you've got 5 murders. No problem. We can sell it. We can help you. No problem. Just sign this contract. There are lawyers that do that. A lot of them. I used to work for 2 of them who would tell everybody everything they wanted to hear. And then they would hand it over to me and they'd say, Rob, go fix this. And I'd say, I can help this person. I'd call them and I'd say, all right, here's what's going on in this case. And they'd say, your boss told me that all of this was going to, they said that I was going to get an apology letter from the police officer. And I'd say, what? He told you what? That's not going to happen. So I didn't last there long. I lasted there about 1.5 years and then decided to make some changes. 3 Girlies is here, says, I'm so happy you got Nate the lawyer on. I liked he was able to flush out the topics more. Nate was great. That was a great conversation. And I've listened to Nate for years, or, probably years now, right? Since about 2022 when I started cranking away at this. And we've never talked, we've never spoken. We've been on the same streams, and I think maybe we said hello one time, but it was really good to finally connect. And so I'm really grateful to you, the chat, for demanding it. Get Nate on here. All right. Take it easy. But I really it was really a fascinating conversation. And Heather says, the youngest girlie says hi. So shout out to the youngest girlie over there at the 3 Girlies households, back from summer camp, wrapping up the week. Glad that you're there and listening in, 3 Girlies. And the youngest girlie says, can jurors watch the J6 hearings? No, the judge said, don't watch those hearings. It's not related to the subpoena, but I would think that they would want they wouldn't want the jurors to watch those hearings. Yeah. The judge said, don't watch any related news tonight. Just kind of leave all of that aside. That was over on Locals. Let's see what came in over on YouTube today. NY Renal ND is here. MD is here. And I haven't seen the good doctor in a long time. And I think this was a question for Nate, but he says, as a co-equal branch, wasn't that concept extended to a bicameral? And when it was a joint Senate and a House committee? That's questions for Nate. So I think he was talking. And honestly, when Nate brought up that Nixon case, I didn't really know what the hell he was talking about, which means I just am not educated on that. But that question goes to that, I think, to that case. So I'm not going to be able to answer it. Bicameral, the concept was about whether Nixon had a different sort of setup when he was dealing with the resignation / impeachment. And I don't know. New York Renal MD. I don't know the answer to that. I apologize, but thank you for the super chat. It's a good question. It's hard to find an analog for the J6 hearings. It really is. Look back to Watergate, pick any one of these things. And so when Nate brought that up, it sort of was like, well, okay, maybe there is some precedent. I hadn't seen that one or heard of that one. We also had another one coming in from 63 Rambler. He says, the riot put an immediate and decisive end to stop the steal. It was, quote, too perfect. It did seem like it was a little bit perfect, right? It's just perfect. And I know this is in conspiracy land, but I feel like there's a weird pattern of things that happens oftentimes with movies. And then we see the imagery that we see in movies in real life. It's weird. I've had several examples of this before, but the one that really resonates with J6 is the Olympus Has Fallen movie, right? I don't know if you saw that, but like really bad imagery of like the Capitol or the White House being taken over. It was really sort of resembled that. And it's weird. There's a lot of examples of that in history. But that was a good one from 63 Rambler. Maybe Sunshine is here. Says Rob emojis. Okay, so I think this is an emoji request. Truckers, Biden, Trump, Mitch McConnell, Jen Psaki, Kyle Rittenhouse, Canadian flag, don't know. Some suggestions. Okay, so we've got a toilet paper emoji. We've got a building emoji, bullseye emoji, spaceship, and a bomb emoji. Okay, those are great suggestions. Yeah, we have. So the more members we get on YouTube, the more sort of joins we get next to the subscribe button, the more custom gifts we can put into our membership. And so you are supporting that. But I do need to update those. I do need to update those because we can leave Rittenhouse in there, but that was old. Right? We put Rittenhouse and Jen Psaki, right? Jen Psaki is not even in there anymore. So maybe it's time for an update. Just Kyles is here. He says, Rob, can we get a shout out to my based 8-year-old nephew that said today on the phone that Biden got COVID from sniffing kids? Yes, you can. This young man's name is Cage with a K, Kaige. Brilliant young man, 8 years old, and he's already extremely observant in the world. And as an 8-year-old, it's important to know about dangers out there in the world. You know, your parents say if a stranger comes up to you and starts sniffing you, it's not okay. Very smart young man, Cage, is recognizing that if the president comes up and sniffs you, it's not okay. And he's making a joke about it. Brilliant. Shout out to Just Cause's based 8-year-old nephew, Cage. Outstanding. You know, a lot of people have some things to say about the future and they're sort of not optimistic about it. That should help calm those nerves a little bit. Cage is on the way. Tara Rayner is here, says the committee rules say that contempt is civil and not criminal. They have agreed to take his docs and set a later date for a depot. The date is still fluid as of today. Oh, it's too funny, Tara. Isn't it funny? It's ridiculous. It's insane, right? They would still take his testimony, but he's being charged with a crime for it. And they're literally doing their committee hearings tonight. We had a couple more come in. We had a couple members come in. And so it's going to be a good time to wrap it up here, my friends. But Mark Owens became a member for 5 months, Mark. Yes. Outstanding. Going to get those morning walk and talks. And Ace C also became a member on YouTube. And so we'll pull that up. Shout outs to AC. Shout outs to Mark Owens. And of course, if you are a member on the watchingthewatchers.locals.com forum or over on YouTube, then you get access to all of those, these little walk and talks and things like this. This is me walking around this morning and, just kind of having some casual conversations. And we're talking about, today we were talking about Joe Biden getting the COVID and, it's just kind of me just kind of walking around out there and it's fun. And we talk for about 20, 30 minutes or so. And, if you're somebody who likes to go outside and get some walk, you can maybe listen while you're walking and, kind of get some fresh air. It's a beautiful thing to do. But that is, as I said, over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where we have an awesome, awesome community. You can also join up at our YouTube channel membership portal right here, clicking that join button right next to subscribe. I am a lawyer at the R&R Law Group. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have an awesome team of people who help really good people charged with crimes find safety and clarity and hope in their cases and beyond that in their lives. We help any type of person from anywhere in the world. We've represented people from literally all over the world. People come to Arizona to visit the Grand Canyon and do all sorts of fun stuff. And so we've helped people globally, and we are passionate about the work that we do. I was at the office today. We had an amazing team building event. We have an awesome crew of people. And we would just love the opportunity to help. And so your referrals, it really keeps us moving. It keeps us in business. And I'm grateful for it. So if you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona, that's the work that we do. And I appreciate your support. Before we wrap it up, thank you to the mods who are modding down the fort. Vienticus Prime did a flyby, drive-by wee. K-Bean, Zulu, haven't seen Zulu in a while, but Just Cause is here. Just Cause had a birthday, by the way. Just Cause, not only did you have a birthday, which means you're 1 year older and 1 year wiser, but you've also got a based nephew who is dunking on Biden with sniffing memes. It's basically the most perfect week ever. Lean is here. Shout out to Lean is in the house. And Lean just said, in the chat. Playing hooky number 1 is also here. Lava Java Lava, we saw him up above. Geomancy Games, and here's Lava Java Lava. Here's Lava Java in the house, and I appreciate all of you. Now, lastly, but of course not leastly, our Spotlight supporters, which means if you're really supporting the show, if you're donating on locals at a certain tier or at the Spotlight support level on YouTube, then I can put a link on here for you. I can put an image, a website. For example, John is over at qsimple.com, right? That you can support his work because he supports the show. I'd encourage you to go over there. And then we just have some other people that just, they're just here. Chris Romero, David B3, and Dr. EMB are all supporting the work. They're all supporting the show. And I am grateful to them, to our mods, to everybody in the community, to each and every one of you with all of your great questions. To our Rumble chat, Anything, Fed Cure, Blue PN is here. And Dog Digger, Elucidation Station, all over at our Rumble channel. And that, my friends, I believe is it for us for the day. So I want to thank you for being a part of the show. We'll be back tomorrow. Probably have a Bannon verdict. Probably not going to be a good one. And we may unpack a little bit of the J6 shenanigans that took place today. But we are going to save all of that for then. And I hope to see you there. Have a great night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.